That's it. Fuck that. That's good.
Do you need treatment? Well, I recommend that you go to Aloe Recovery. It is a beautiful facility located in sunny Southern California. It was created by our friend Bob Forrest, his friend Evan Haynes, and their buddy Bob. And this place has everything. There also might have been a guy named Jared who's associated with this that I never mentioned. I think Jared plays a big part. So go Jared. Aloe is a place that treats addicts and alcoholics with respect. It offers crazy amenities, including sound bath meditation, equine therapy, surfing. But that's not the reason that Aloe is good. Aloe is good because they care about taking care of addicts. They make sure that an addict who is in crisis has a detox that is comforting, and that's really important if you're coming off of heroin or benzos or alcohol. A comforting detox is the best. They also have a staff with hundreds of years of experience, and they treat co-occurring disorders, including severe mental illness. If you are fucked and you are willing to go to Southern California to get better, please consider Aloe. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by Healing Appalachia. Appalachia, the home of banjos, forested mountains, and the moonshining tradition. But it's also ground zero for the opioid epidemic. Wherever you're listening to this in the Dopey Nation, you should know that there are a lot of addicts just like you in Appalachia. And while there are strong communities of recovery throughout the region, addicts die every day. Overdose deaths are 65% more common in Appalachia than elsewhere, and the death rate is particularly high among those between the ages of 25 and 44. Healing Appalachia will work to make it easier for those seeking freedom from addiction and for those looking to find a way out. The mission of Healing Appalachia, presented by Hope in the Hills, is to organize an incredible day of entertainment with music, recovery speakers, and delicious food. With your help, we will raise funds for organizations that support recovery across the Appalachian region. On September 28th, the second annual Healing Appalachia concert will be held in Lewisburg, West Virginia. Headlining the event will be Tyler Childers, a storytelling singer-songwriter who just released his new album at #1 on the country charts, along with Brian Fallon of Gaslight Anthem, the Gibson Brothers, Arlo McKinley and the Lonesome Sound, and Sonora May. Perhaps, though, most exciting for the Dopey Nation, and I really think this is true, it is the chance to see me, Dave, make my debut emceeing the entire event. It will be crazy. If you want to get away for some great music while supporting a worthy and extremely dopey cause, come to Healing Appalachia on September 28th. All-day tickets are only $35 before the show and $50 at the door. If you can't make it to beautiful West Virginia for the event, please consider donating to support Healing Appalachia's mission. Details are at healingappalachia.org, Healing Appalachia on Facebook, and at Healing Appalachia on Instagram. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by listeners like you in the Dopey Nation via the power and the passion of the Dopey Patreon. Go to www.com. Go to www.patreon.com/dopeypodcast and you give a couple bucks. Help keep the show happy, joyous, and free. Give money. It's great. If you guys want hats and you want stickers, you Venmo me. If you want the high fashion of the Dopey universe, go to www.dopeypodcast.com. Dopey Con is coming up. We need stories for Dopey Con, but we also need stories for the show. So please send in your most fucked up and funny drug stories to You send it to dopeypodcast@gmail.com. And that was Harold with the cool dopey music. Find him at Health Collective 666 on Instagram. Enough ads. Here is the show. Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. And I'm Dave. And I am in Manhattan in my father's apartment, and we have a very special guest. His name is Bill Blaber. I was sure his name was Bill Blaber, but it's not. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. You got it right. A lot of people don't get it right.
I had it wrong. and until let's do some full disclosure. I met Bill actually through Chris, but only through emails where I tried to. Bill works at Mountainside, where Chris and I went to treatment, where Dopey Con is happening. You are a sober coach.
I am. I'm a senior recovery coach at Mountainside Treatment Center here in New York City. And And our treatment center is up in Canaan, Connecticut. But I work with a lot of clients who get out of treatment and come back to New York and want to make recovery coaching part of their aftercare plan. I love it. Love what I do.
When did you start recovery coaching?
I've been in the addiction recovery industry for 5+ years, a little under 6 years, and I started working with Mountainside almost 3 years ago. Next month will be 3 years, October 25th.
You've got a real cruise director kind of tone when you're not talking about Madonna's world tour. You're like the ultimate cruise director.
Right. I just mentioned that tonight is a big night. Madonna's brand new world tour. Madam X opens at BAM in Brooklyn, and
oh shit, it's in Brooklyn.
It's in Brooklyn.
Are you going?
I'm going on September 25th, October 1st, and October 7th.
Did you ever hear the story about when I met Madonna?
Stop, Dave. Do
you want to hear the story?
My life is like 6 degrees of separation from Madonna. I just spoke to somebody last week who told me, oh, let me tell you about the time I went to the movies with Madonna.
Shut up. When did they go to the movies with Madonna?
About a year ago. And I said, what movie did you see? And he couldn't remember. So I said, you're lying. He said, no. He goes, I don't remember because I didn't watch the movie. I sat there the whole time looking at her.
Amazing. How does he know Madonna to go to the movies with her?
He's in the arts, and he knows a dancer who dances with Madonna. But, I mean, I could give you countless examples from my life of people who have met Madonna, spent time with Madonna. The director of our recovery coaching program in New York, Jason, danced with Madonna
Where?
years ago at a party before, I don't want to talk about his past, but, way before he worked for Mountainside. And he loves to throw that in my face, that he danced with Madonna at like a Christmas party.
Well, do you want to hear the story of when I met Madonna?
Yeah, lay it on me.
Okay, the year was 1987.
Oh, my God.
I was a 7th grader on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Okay? Just to set the scene, it was 7th grade, it was the fall. Madonna was shooting Who's That Girl on the Upper East Side. I was a very fashionable young boy, and I would wear Converse All-Stars, but because I was so lazy, I wouldn't tie the sneakers, and in fact, the laces would undo all the way. So I'd basically have like undone shoes with the laces hanging out. In my school, it was a very progressive kind of fancy pants school, and when you start 7th grade, throughout your time in the school, you get free periods. But when you start the 7th grade, Monday morning, first period is free, for whatever reason. So they're shooting Who's That Girl down the street on 94th Street between Madison and 5th Avenue, and I had nothing to do, and I don't know why I was alone, but I walked over there alone to watch them shoot a scene, and I'm just sitting there, and she gets out of the cab, and she goes, hey. I went, hey. And she goes, your shoe's untied. And I said, I know. I said, it's a choice.
So Madonna actually spoke to you.
Yeah, and then she said, you cut school to see me? And I said, no, actually, it's a free period. And that was it.
Oh, that's funny. That was at the apex, like when she was shooting Who's That Girl? She was like, she was already huge, but that was on the rise. And then right after Who's That Girl, she exploded.
Oh, yeah. But can you believe that me and Madonna had that tete-a-tete?
I can't even tell you, like, I'm sitting here very envious. I have this dream. No, I don't have this dream. I really believe in my heart of hearts that I will one day have dinner with Madonna.
I believe it.
And I don't know where it's going to happen. I just have this innate feeling that, like I said, she's circling me through all these people in my life, the 6 degrees of separation. I've actually been in the room with Madonna. I used to study Kabbalah when I was first getting sober over on the East Side.
I think it's pronounced Kabbalah.
No, that's the way the Americans pronounce it, but it's Kabbalah.
Who says Kabbalah?
The Kabbalists. So, no, it's like
where
the
do they
Hebrew
say
way.
Kabbalah?
Like when you're at the Kabbalah Center, they say Kabbalah.
Kabbalah. I wonder if there's like I just can see shoemakers, like a cobbler, saying, well, not only am I a cobbler, but I also practice Kabbalah. After I'm done cobbling, I Kabbalah. So you were Kabbalaing with Madonna?
I was Kabbalaing with Madonna. I was sitting in...
Well, break it down.
So I was going there regularly, and I think it's Tuesday nights.
Where?
Do you know what the Zohar is?
I have some knowledge of the Zohar. I am a Talmudic scholar,
right,
don't you know?
It's like this ancient...
I actually don't know, so tell me, please.
It's like a series of, like a series of books. It's like the World Encyclopedia, like there's 20 volumes of it or something, and it's this book of illuminations and light, and it has all this power.
The Zohar.
And
it's some Jewish mysticism
Exactly.
book. Okay.
And so every Tuesday night there was like a Zohar class. And she was, an active student of Kabbalah.
So you were in this Kabbalah class with
I was
Madonna?
while I walked in, I didn't know she was going to be there, and I'm sitting in like the second row toward the front with my friend, and all of a sudden my cell phone buzzes.
Oh no!
And so like this is sort of like this is a spirituality class.
So you're not supposed to have a buzzing cell phone in Kabbalah class.
So like I pulled out my phone and I did this, like I held it down by my leg, and it said, and it was from my friend who was sitting right next to me, and it said, "She's here." And I was like, "She's here?" And so I look at him, and he went like
Did
this.
you know
like,
Madonna might be there?
No idea.
Okay.
No idea. And he like took his head and he like, kinked it off to like to the right-hand side. And he's like, look. And I turned my head, and remember, I'm in the second row of this class with this big rabbi up front teaching,
Is it a rabbi?
Yeah, he's a rabbi.
Okay.
And
does he say Kabbalah or Kabbalah?
he says Kabbalah.
Okay. It would be so annoying.
With an accent.
If I saw Madonna do an interview and she says, "I study Kabbalah," she doesn't even talk like the way she used to. When
No.
You got your shoes untied. She sounded like Cyndi Lauper or something.
Right, exactly.
And now she's like,
she's had elocution lessons.
I study Kabbalah.
Right.
Anyway.
She, so I looked, I cranked my neck all the way around, which was, I was trying to do it very subtly so that, no one would notice. And there she is, back row, looking amazing, like completely done up, these big, beautiful, like horn-rimmed glasses on, her hair done, makeup done, and on either side of her were these huge guys dressed in all black, which were obviously security, but
not your regular Kabbalah
no,
students.
these big guys.
Do you think they were Talmudic scholars also?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. But they were very intimidating, and they were there, so there was no chance anyone was going to go up and say, "Hey, Madonna, what did you think?" I didn't hear one more word the rest of that night, that they were teaching. I kept trying to crank my neck. At the end of it, though, I did stand up immediately and turned around so that I could stare at her. And she stayed in her seat, so she didn't even get up and try and leave the room as everyone else was leaving. Like, she sat there as people were leaving the room.
And it's not like a 12-step meeting where you can disclose this kind of stuff in a Kabbalah meeting.
That's a really good question. Kabbalah really helped me in my early recovery, but no, it's not like that. She when she's actively involved, from what I understand, she's at that center. I think it's on like East 40th
What do
Street.
do they teach you how to like levitate or disappear? Or?
No, I mean, all I know is that this time around when I tried to get sober back in 2009, it was like a light switch went on when I heard about Kabbalah, and now I'm going to laugh every time I say Kabbalah. But it just all made sense, like this mysticism and the way they
give us a little
explain
piece. Give us a smidge.
Oh, it's been years. I mean, basically,
a smidge.
Well, let me describe it this way. Like, so there's the Bible. And there are all these stories in the Bible. And there's like the Adam and Eve story. There's the Moses story. And Kabbalah has a way of taking those stories and reinterpreting them in a way that makes sense. So they're parables or they're metaphors or they're ways to describe what's really going on so that you don't take them literally.
It somehow contemporizes biblical stories.
I guess, I don't know if contemporize is the word, but it
reframes them so you can really relate to them.
It teaches you the lesson and the spiritual principle behind like what the Adam and Eve story is really about. Like, I could have told you this years ago while I was studying it, and I really can't recall right now. But it just was like you took a light switch and you turned it on, and everything made sense for me.
Amazing.
I think a lot of that is because my primary drug of choice was crystal meth, and my crystal meth use was very, very, I describe it as being very spiritual. I was on a different level, let me tell you. I was on a totally different level for years when I was using. So when I started to get some clarity, this Jewish mysticism really, it opened up my eyes and it made me feel less crazy.
And you're not Jewish. Blaber is not a Jewish name.
No, I say I'm like Jew-ish. That's the way, sort of Jew-ish. I've dated a lot of great Jewish guys, but no, I'm not Jewish. I grew up Catholic on Long Island.
Nice. That's pretty close to Jewish.
Yeah,
though.
pretty.
Anything on Long Island could be totally
right.
Seen as, or at least allowed to be sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like when somebody's allowed to be honorary.
Honorary.
You can be honorary Jewish by being a Catholic on Long Island. You could do the accent, I'm sure.
Yeah, my mother wouldn't agree, but yes.
That's funny. But was Floral Park? Are there a lot of Jews in Floral Park?
Not at all. No, I mean, Floral Park today is pretty much the same it was when I was growing up. It's a great town. Their slogan is it's a great place to live.
Because there's no Jews.
Because there's no Jews or black people.
My town's like that too. My
Really?
town is the
Where did you grow up? What town?
I grew up here in this apartment.
You grew up in the city.
But
okay.
I live in Sayville.
Right.
And Sayville is
I have family in Sayville. Well, they're not there anymore, but my whole life I had family there.
My favorite joke about Sayville is the town is so white, the 7-Eleven doesn't even sell dark chocolate. Anyway, though, crystal meth, Fucking A. Madonna. What are we doing here? I fucking...
My friends would tell you every time you sit down with Bill, Madonna always comes up. So I'm so proud that actually I've kept that going along with this interview.
Well, I gave me a real opportunity to tell my meeting Madonna story, which I've always wanted to tell.
You ever told that story?
I don't know. I feel like
on Dopey.
I feel like I probably wanted to impress Chris with it. But now, I like that you told this very spiritual, mystical place. I also like... I've told this story a million times, but I just want to mention it to you, that there's a guy in B&H who does sound. I believe his name is Yudi, and he is a Kabbalan, or how do we say it again?
Kabbalah.
A Kabbalah scholar, and he's very interested in sound because the Kabbalah teaches us that all life is created with a vibration.
Right. You send these vibrations out into the universe, and they come back to you.
All right, that's it. Enough of this.
Okay.
Now, you are a drug addict, a crystal meth addict in long-term recovery.
Yep, 10 years this past June.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Bill, again, works at Mountainside, and they're doing Dopey Con and blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 Blaber. And fucking he had me on Mountainside's first podcast and interviewed me so beautifully that I was like, I got to get Bill on Dopey.
Yeah, it was great. It was the first time. I was really nervous. It was the first time I've ever sat down, just like you and I are sitting down right now. There's no rehearsal. You sit down and you prepare, but we sat down with you, me and Jessica, who's our alumni manager. She works up in Canaan at our treatment center. And we had...
You hear Jessica? He's mentioning you.
Yeah, I've got to get Jessica in there. She's amazing.
She is amazing.
And yeah, we did this podcast, and I felt like it really went well. I don't know if you had this experience at the beginning, but when we were done... I went blank. I couldn't remember anything that we had talked about because I tried to stay really engaged in the conversation.
That's
so
good.
I wasn't like rehearsing, I wasn't repeating lines that we had rehearsed. I was like really sitting there engaged. And so when they finally released it, I was like, oh, we talked about that. I was really upset that they cut a lot of the RuPaul stuff out.
They did?
Yeah, not all of it, but a little bit.
Oh, you got so excited about RuPaul, too.
It came up because you had just had Alaska on your podcast, but we had spoken a lot more. So if anybody's listening, well, hopefully people are listening. We had a nice conversation about RuPaul, but a lot of it got cut.
I think RuPaul is destined to come on Dopey. Madonna, probably not.
RuPaul would be amazing on Dopey.
I just knew that... I think we had great chemistry when I was there, and I don't remember fucking anything. I never do.
Does that happen to you? Do you blank out like after you do an episode because you're so focused on what's going on?
I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm so focused, but that was what Chris would always say at the end of every episode. He'd say, "I have no idea what we just talked about," and I don't know. I know that he wasn't particularly focused. I think it's more like. That's the best way to look at it, like that you were so focused. But it's really that I think you lose yourself in the conversation.
Right.
And then little bits pop into your head. You know what I mean? Like when I interview somebody, I have a plan. You know what I mean? I have bullet points. Like I want to talk about this, and this, especially because I don't know them and I don't know that there's going to be chemistry. I don't know what it's going to be. So when I think about what we did talk about, I was like, okay, we did talk about this, and this. Or if I have somebody on, I usually have a plan. I actually, with you, I had a little bit of a plan, but obviously not much because here we are.
Right.
But my plan was, because like I've very much enjoyed all this Madonna talk, but my plan was for you to tell a Dopey story in the beginning. So would you grace us with a Dopey story?
Yeah, I'd love to. You know, when I found out I was coming on, I thought about what am I going to tell. I told you on the phone yesterday when we were talking, I have stories that start at G and go up to XXX. And, you know, if you and I were sitting at Starbucks, there are stories I would definitely tell you without hesitation. But there are stories that I think might even make you nervous. I mean, we're sitting in your dad's kitchen.
But my dad was a gay square dancing guy. He like I don't think you realize what my dad's like.
No, he's not here, is he?
And when I say gay, I mean homosexual square dancing. Like he's in a group of homosexual square dancers. Not like it's so gay.
It's a big thing.
Yeah. Well, he was part of it. Times Squares. Have you ever done the Times Square?
I haven't.
That was his thing.
No. But I thought about...
I talked about my dad being in this gay square dancing thing, and the audience, the Dopey Nation, thought I was being homophobic, like putting down the square dancing as gay, when in actuality it's a homosexual gay. Square. Right. Yeah. So I think that's very funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, please.
So I thought about what I'm going to talk about. Like, the first thing that came across my mind was, you know, I don't sit around and think about these stories anymore. Not because I don't want to dwell on them or that they're upsetting or anything. It's just, you know, I've moved on from these stories. Also, you have to remember, when I was high on crystal meth, I didn't remember an awful lot of what happened days later when I came down. And the stories that resonate with me, that I actually feel in my heart, that affect me emotionally today, are stories that you would probably think are pretty boring. But because they're usually, I would have a realization, or I would have like this awakening in the moment. So those stories would be the stories that I think about that still, serve me today. But the one story that comes to mind that I think I should tell you is I was living in New Jersey, in Edison, New Jersey.
Okay.
And newly single because my partner left me, and he had lots of reasons to leave me. And I was very late to the game when it came to drugs and alcohol. I grew up on Long Island, Catholic, great family, great parents. So my drug use really started in my 30s. So when I started, I went all out. And when someone asked me, do you want to do crystal meth? The way they said it is, I don't know if it's like this, in the heterosexual world, but they're like, do you want to party? And so I literally innocently said, yeah, sure, I'm newly single. I'll party.
I love to party.
And I really, what a geek I was. I thought, oh, yeah, sure, I'll party. Anyway, I show up at the party, and the party included, snorting crystal meth. So that, quickly led to, well, not so quickly, but it led to me smoking crystal meth, and then eventually injecting crystal meth. And once that happens, I was off to the races. Once you inject crystal meth, you never want to smoke it or snort it. And so I
used to shoot crystal meth.
Did you really?
In Los Angeles.
I didn't know that.
I had come back from rehab in Florida, and I moved in with two friends of mine who were stoners, and I had planned on smoking weed, but what I didn't know was that one of my friends had gotten addicted to crystal meth that month. So he came back just smoking meth, and I basically was like, I bet you if I start smoking meth, it'll give me a good excuse to do heroin again.
Wow.
And I got into smoking it, and then I got into speedballing with crystal meth and dope. And then if I didn't have dope, I also everyone talked about shooting meth, so I just would do it. But it was I'm just so up naturally. It was not. It didn't. Right. It wasn't conducive to my brain.
I've also learned that the meth out west is very different than the meth out east. I'm not sure if that's still the case. They call it crank out there a lot, and it does have a different effect because I was lucky enough to try the meth from the West Coast sometimes, and then the meth on the East Coast, and I much prefer the meth on the East Coast.
I never did meth on the East Coast.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you probably hit the West Coast meth. And I don't know if it did this to you, but it basically I felt like Superman. I could do anything in the world, no inhibitions, loved everybody, could have walked up to anybody and start a conversation with anybody. And so let me move on to this story. So there are all these parties, right? Where all these, things go on at these parties. And
what kind of things?
I've seen things that I would never want to see again. And you're either in a club or you're in somebody's apartment here in the city, and there's a lot of naked people. There's a lot of people standing around doing things that you've only heard about.
Like what? What kind of things?
Well, they're like these sex parties, and these but they're not just sex parties. They're crazy sex parties, and there's porn on in the background, and there's
the Zoom room things.
What's a Zoom room?
Well, on the gayest episode of Dopey, which I
listened to,
or then maybe it was on even gayer than the gayest episode of Dopey. The guy talks about shooting meth in these sex parties, and with the porn on the background, but not only porn, there's interactive video where you're going from sex room to sex room to sex room in the room.
Like camera stuff.
Yeah.
I've never been on camera.
Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, mom and dad will be happy to hear that. Never been on camera. They did have to pick me up once on the street when I was high out of my mind. That was early on. It was awful.
Okay, so you're in the fucking party.
So
everybody's fucking and sucking, shooting and smoking meth.
Exactly. And so I leave the party, okay? Because I got
let me ask you though. Are there is it like a typical kind of gay thing that's in your imagination? Like everybody's kind of got leather Speedos
There you
and
go.
fucking shackles and fake mustaches and stuff.
You sounds like you've experienced with this. That's exactly what it's like.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you're picturing in your head.
It's
It's
like
exactly
that.
what it's like.
Okay.
Some nights more than others, but yes, definitely. So I left, right? Because I got to a point where I go out of my mind, and I think everyone's out to get me. And so to take care of myself and be safe, I leave. But the problem is when I leave, I'm out on the street, right? And I'm out on the street like dressed really inappropriately for the time of day.
What were you wearing? Like a leather Speedo
I was
with
like
a fake
wearing
mustache?
so it was like 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning. People were going to work. I'm in like a tank top and these like short shorts because it was warm out. So it was the spring or the summer. I had these boots on and, wired out of my mind. So like I must have owned 20 pairs of sunglasses. I'm not kidding you, back in the heyday, because I would always have sunglasses on because A, I didn't want to make eye contact with you, but B, the light, I just couldn't keep my eyes open in the light from doing all the meth. So I'm walking down the street and it was...
because your pupils get big, right?
They get very big and very sensitive to light, which is why if you go to a crystal meth party, all the drapes and the curtains are drawn. It adds to the whole mystique and the darkness.
Yes.
So I'm walking down 57th Street. Do you know that building on the corner of 57th Street right next to what used to be Mount Sinai Roosevelt? It's on the northeast corner. It's a huge apartment building. So I'm in that building and I come out and I walk down 57th Street toward Broadway. And this is back in the days, now I'm talking about in the early 2000s, like this is around 2002, 2003.
Okay.
And AOL was a big thing. So that's where I always got I always made my connections via AOL, like, you've got mail. And I still have an AOL email account today. But so I would get in the chat rooms and I would make my connections in the chat rooms and then meet up with those people. So I was really aware that
you were like an internet meth trailblazer.
Yeah.
Gay internet, AOL, meth trailblazer.
That's all I did was like live on the internet, show up at the guy's
But it was
place.
like pre-internet, but still connecting through the internet.
The internet was around, but like you were really like connecting with people through like Comcast and AOL, like these.
We'll say it's
services.
the early days of this
It is the early
phenomenon.
days,
So I
yeah.
love that.
And here's an interesting thing that I thought about just walking over here today. When I was out there using crystal meth in 2002, 2003 intravenously, no one talked about it. So I would go to these parties. Here, this is important. I would go to these parties and I'd want to use with needles. And I was like shunned from the gay crystal meth community because they weren't using needles. They were smoking it. But I was introduced to it by somebody. And once you do it that way, you don't want to go back. So I was in a very small minority of people who were shooting up crystal meth in the early 2000s.
Right.
Today, it's really changed. And it's really the way most of these guys that I meet today in recovery did it. But back then, so this is significant. Like back then, it was a big deal. So I was really out of my mind walking down 57th Street towards Broadway, keeping in mind that I find all my drugs and my connections on AOL. So they were building Time Warner. It was called AOL Time Warner Center at Columbus Circle. Do you remember that as they were building that?
Yes.
It was that old convention center, and it was run down. It hadn't been used
Right
for
by
years.
right across from the Trump building.
Right,
Yes.
right. I'm not even sure. I don't think the Trump building was there yet. Was it? I think the Trump building came after.
I don't know.
Anyway, so they're
I know what you're
building,
talking about.
so
It's like a mall now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So the Time Warner Center, what is I think Time Warner Center right now, was being built. So it was a huge construction project. So I'm walking and I look over and I don't know why I knew, but I knew it was the AOL Time Warner Center. So something clicked in my mind that, well, I get my drugs on AOL. So this building...
They know.
They know.
Yeah.
And whoever runs AOL is responsible for me shooting up crystal meth and my life being ruined because things were falling apart. I wasn't happy. And I was like, I need to get to that guy. Whoever runs AOL.
What were you going to do to him, though?
So I looked at the building. I'm like, so where does the owner of a company work? On the top floor.
Sure.
Now, the top floor hadn't even been built yet.
Right.
So in my mind, I was like, I just have to get as high as possible, like high in the building.
And you'll find this
get to
motherfucker.
The top, right.
Yes.
I'll find this motherfucker.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell him that you're ruining my life.
Uh-huh.
So I looked across the street and there was a building, like a regular apartment building across the street. And I was like, I'm going to go into that building. And I'm going to go onto the roof of that building. So, because this was a construction site. I couldn't get into the AOL building. And, it was like a major construction site. So I walk now picture this. This is a really nice apartment building. I walk in short shorts, a wife beater tank top, sunglasses on with like a backpack on my back, boots on my feet.
See, I hear like like house music playing as you walk, like you have a speaker attached to you.
Like, I didn't belong in this building. It was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And I probably hadn't showered in days. And so I walk in the building, nonchalantly, and I walk to the elevator, and I press the elevator, and I get in, and I press the top floor. And so I take the elevator all the way up to the top floor, and I get off. And I'm like, okay, how do I get to the roof? So I looked around, and there was a staircase, and I got to the staircase, and I just walked. I had no idea where I was going. So I walked and walked and walked. I finally got to the roof. No one stopped me. No one was around. And so I looked. So they had a beautiful roof. It was all landscaped and manicured.
And nobody stopped you.
No one stopped me. So this is literally across the street from where they're building the Time Warner Center. So I'm up on the roof, and I'm looking straight in front of me was the construction project. And there are all these construction workers. And so I had the idea that I needed to get their attention because they needed to help me find this guy who ran AOL so that I could give him a piece of my mind.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like, that building is still taller than this roof that I'm standing on. So I look around, and those water towers
Sure.
on top of these buildings?
Of course.
And this is a very New York thing, right? So there's a beautiful water tower, that wooden water tower right there. And so I look at the water tower, and there's a ladder. I'm like, okay, so
I can barely believe this story. But keep going.
I'm on the top of a roof in New York City, and I'm like, well, if I climb that ladder,
I'll
get even closer.
Let's stop for a second, though.
Okay.
This is one of the most irrational stories I've ever heard. How many totally crazy irrational stories do you have?
A lot.
Okay, continue.
A lot. So I didn't even think twice, Dave. I'm on the top of a roof, and I walk over to the ladder, and I think nothing of it. I start climbing, up, and it's a little skinny wire ladder, not easy to climb, with my boots and this backpack on my back. And so I climb up, and then I get to the top of the ladder, and there's a door. And so I hang onto the ladder, and I turn around, and I see the construction site. And so I start waving, and I start almost sort of enticing them to engage with me. And I don't know whether or not
How do you entice them?
I was screaming and wailing my arms, and
okay.
It was hard to tell. I mean, it was literally across the street. It wasn't far. It was just a regular block, a city block. So you probably could have thrown a ball and it would have hit the building.
Right.
So inside, I climb to the top of the ladder, and there's a little door, and I was like, okay, so I open the door, and I think that I'm going to crawl into the water tower.
Right.
And because it's dark and it's mysterious in there. And, a lot of people say this about their drug use, that it was such a dark period in their life. It really was a dark period for me. I thought that Satan and the devil were running AOL, because it was really when I was hanging out at these parties, there were these devil worshippers at these parties. So I was like, well, then that's who runs AOL. Someone who's dark and evil like that.
You were actually face to face with the most demonic part of drug addiction also.
Right.
Because it's a lot of crazy meth psychosis that involves the devil and the most dark shit in the world.
So you get it, right?
I do.
And you're talking to a guy who grew up really conservatively as a Catholic, so it's the antithesis.
Well, devil really, really rules the roost in Catholicism.
And you're and I grew up fearing the devil.
Exactly.
Right? So that's what I was drawn to in my drug use. So I open the door, and it's dark. It is pitch black. And I lean in, and I couldn't see anything. I had my sunglasses on too, right? So I lean into the water tower, and I pass out. And my legs are hanging out one end, and it was right at my waist. I'm hanging on my waist.
What was inside?
Water.
But you open the door. Where are you in?
I thought there was some evil, mysterious body inside.
But what was inside the door? It's not like you opened the door and water came flooding out on you.
No, you open the door, and I guess the water is at a lower level.
So you see it.
I can hear it. I can't see it, but it smelled very humid. It was very muggy in there.
The word is musty.
Right, musty. Okay,
Yes.
It was very musty.
Okay.
And I pass out. So
looking down at the water in the water tower.
So hanging out legs. So if you were one of the construction guys across the street,
you'd see this gay dude in short shorts' ass hanging out of the water.
You see some guy's ass hanging out of a water tower at 9 a.m. in the morning,
right?
And with these big black boots on,
and these very short shorts,
right? So what do you think they thought? They thought I was trying to kill myself,
or that you were dead.
Or that I was dead, right.
I might
Right.
assume you were dead, that you have drowned.
I often wondered, was anyone watching this happen? Was anyone watching this guy climb up this ladder, open the door to the water tower, and lean in and then just plop there? So next thing I know, and I don't know how long it went by, but next thing I know, I'm being like dragged out of the water tower by the New York City Fire Department, and I'm completely disoriented. No idea like how long I had been passed out, but I still knew that I needed to get to the top of that AOL water tower. And I said to them, "You need to help me get up there." And I was
Hold on. You're passed out in the water tower.
Right.
The fire department comes because the construction workers see you hanging out of the thing.
Correct.
They wake you up.
They wake me up.
And they don't arrest you.
They do not arrest me.
Okay.
They were actually very kind.
And concerned, I'm sure.
Concerned, very friendly.
Like, what are you doing with the water?
Asking me some questions. I thought I was going to be in trouble or get arrested because I had been arrested so many times.
It seems like
before.
you should have been arrested.
Well,
You're on a roof in a water tower. You obviously, I was at Penn Station the other day. They made me not sit in a certain spot because I was on private property or some shit. I mean, you're in somebody else's water tower and they come, off to somebody else's roof. What do they say?
So they asked me those, what are you doing here? Are you? They were very concerned. Are you okay? What have you been up to? What's your name? Where are you from? And I'm thinking firemen, right? So what do firemen have on top of their trucks? Ladders. So I said, you need to get me on. I said, is your fire truck downstairs? And they're looking at me like, there's no fire. We're here to save you. And I was like, I need to get on your ladder so I can get to the top of the AOL Time Warner Center. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Well, they're not far off.
So here's the best part. They take me down very nicely. We walk down to whatever level it was that I got off on the elevator at. We get on the elevator, we go all the way down to the first floor, and then Eyewitness News is outside with cameras. I can see it to the Eyewitness News van, Channel 7, ABC, right?
They came for you.
They came for me because I was hanging outside of a water tower. No one knew what was going on. And so I literally had TV cameras in my face and somebody with...
Can we see this anywhere?
I've looked, but I didn't look too hard because I was mortified. And, I don't think... they go around the city all day long, like trying to find news stories and stuff. They don't air everything. I don't think it was ever aired.
Nobody ever told you they saw it.
No one ever told me they saw it. It was a while before I told people it actually happened. But yeah, the news truck was out there and there was a lot of commotion. The police were down on the street with the news people, and then the fire people handed me over to the police, and then they took me to the local precinct.
And then what?
And then I started to come out of it, and I had to come up with a story really quick as to why I was on the water tower. And so I explained to them that I was with friends and they led me up here and they left me behind and I'd been up all night and I was just really tired. And somebody said to me, so you decided to fall asleep in a water tower? And I said, well, I didn't mean to fall asleep.
Did you say you were drunk?
No, I just said that I was with some people who took advantage of me.
Wow, you're very bright.
Yeah.
I mean, you really made the best of a terrible situation.
Yeah.
If it was me, I would have I would have been in jail. Somebody else might have been in Bellevue. That's a situation where you're either going to jail or institutionalized. And the fact that you could talk yourself to just being released, I commend you. I think that's great.
What I always had working in my favor is I don't look like your typical drug addict, right? I was clean cut. I was always, I spoke well. I was dressed well. I looked like your normal.
You smell good too. He comes in, you smell good.
Right, there you go. Thank you.
And I'm sure the firemen were like, this guy smells great.
So I don't know if they ever thought or they could figure out what happened.
Dude, if you had said the devil's in the top of the AOL tower, right. I needed your ladder to get to the top. I climbed the water tower to get closer to the devil. They would have locked you up, but you were too smart for that.
Well, they took me to the precinct and they put me on a psych hold for 24 hours.
They did. Okay.
They put me on a psych hold for 24 hours. But as soon as I was this is not the first time I've been on a psych hold. And it was like the last thing that I ever wanted to happen, because have you ever been in the psych ward?
I haven't.
It's boring as fuck. You're sitting around, and you don't really see anybody. I mean, they sit down, they ask you some questions, but they were able to ascertain pretty quickly that I was probably high out of my mind and that I didn't really have psychotic issues. So I was there for about 24 hours, and I had to denounce whatever I had told them, that people were out there to hurt me, that I was safe, that I had a place to go. I remember them saying where are you from? And I'm like, Edison, New Jersey. That was the other thing too. They're like, how did you get to the top of this building and in a water tower, but you live in Edison, New Jersey? So I concocted a story where, I met up with some people and they slipped me something. They drugged me and I didn't think that was going to happen. And then they were these.
That's what you said.
That's what I said.
Okay, that works. Now, this story is easily one of the greatest Dopey stories we've had for some time, if not one of the greatest we've ever had. But you fucked up my whole plan for the episode.
Oh, no.
But that's okay. I can live with it because you did come with some serious, amazing Dopey. So just so the Dopey Nation knows, and you know it if you read the description of the article, one of my fantasy Dopey guests was Michael Imperioli, who plays Christopher on The Sopranos.
I do know that.
And I always wanted him to come and reenact the classic Relapse scene in The Sopranos. And I had heard him on a podcast, and he came over to do an interview. The thing about it is he didn't get Dopey. So I called Bill up to come over to bring some Dopey with him, and you did the job.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to play a long, not particularly Dopey interview with Michael Imperioli, and then we're going to come back with Bill.
That sounds good.
Does it?
Yep.
I think you've destroyed the Michael Imperioli interview with your insane amount of Dopey.
Listen, I've heard the interview. You sent it to me last night. And Dave, you do I told you this a second ago. You do a great job. It's a really good interview.
All right, but it's nothing compared to this fucking short shorts on the fucking water tower. But here's Michael Imperioli. So hello and welcome to Dopey, podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. And as any real Dopey fan knows, I'm a Sopranos freak, and before I even do that, I'm going to introduce my guest because I'm shocked that he is sitting in my father's apartment. It's Michael Imperioli. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And you don't know this, but when Chris and I started making the show,
Who's Chris?
Chris is my friend who I started the show with.
Oh, okay.
And we were so obviously just drug addicts in recovery, but both of us spent a ton of time on drugs and off drugs watching The Sopranos. So The Sopranos became the kind of crux of many episodes, arguments, debates. And so it's very cool that you came on. You're actually the third member of the Sopranos world that's been on the show.
Who's the other ones?
We had Lilo Brancato, who obviously had a serious drug story.
Yeah.
You know that guy?
Of course, yeah.
And the comedian Modi. You know Modi?
No.
He played a Hasidic Jew in one of those hotel
in those
episodes.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
He was not great.
He was not great.
He was not great. But he was funny because he just tore me down a lot, which was funny. I have to tell you, I'm a gigantic fan of yours. I've admired your shit forever. I just read your book, The Perfume Burned His Eyes. I love it.
Thank you.
It's great. And I've been a fan of yours basically since I've ever seen you. You know, I saw you in Lean On Me. I saw you in fucking The Basketball Diaries, obviously Goodfellas. So we're talking about just a serious New York pedigree. And I don't think, and this might be me reaching, but I don't think The Sopranos could have been The Sopranos without you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think, you being in Goodfellas must have been a crazy trip for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was 22 or 23, I think, and I just started being in films for a year. I started acting school at 17. At the same time, started trying to get work through the trade papers and going to shitty auditions and off Broadway shitholes, and never got anything. And finally got a play after this is now 4 or 5 years down the road. And one of my classmates, we were doing a scene together. She was auditioning an agent. I got a part. So Goodfellas to me, for an Italian American kid who wants to be an actor. At that time, being in Goodfellas was like being in the World Series with the Yankees, and they're bringing you up from the minors.
Well, that's really what it is.
That's what it was.
We're talking about. it's like your career, it's pretty insane because Goodfellas is arguably the greatest movie of all time. You can make that argument. I could make that argument.
People would. Yeah.
And The Sopranos, I would make an argument that could have been the greatest series of all time. You also got to work with Spike Lee a ton, and you come across as a really, really classic sort of New York character, and it's beautiful. It's great.
Thank you.
Another thing which always was so appropriate to me for our show is that you've played so many drug addicts and drug dealers. So I did a poll on Twitter last year amongst our fans, the Dopey Nation, and it was like, what's your favorite drug addict character in anything? And you won like 90% of the vote.
That's
Christopher.
Tremendous.
Well,
that's really exciting.
Is it exciting to you?
Yeah, I think it says a lot. I don't mean that facetiously. I mean, it's a compliment that people, you're talking about a specific genre of like film and television and, characters. And that's, why I was always attracted to those roles, because they're very dramatic. The stakes are very, very high. And not to pardon the pun, but
sure.
And for an actor, the extremes of emotion, of physical states, of sanity, insanity, those things are pushed to the limit. So, they were always roles that physically I always kind of looked the part, just being like the ages I was and how in New York and came up and kind of a little street type edge, whatever. But they just. The life and death of it is juicy for an actor.
Well, I think the thing that really you always played well was this sort of ego with self-doubt built into it, which is kind of the addict condition.
Right.
The piece of shit at the center of the universe.
I was just about to say that.
Is what we call an addict. And, I also, if you trace yourself, if I trace you back to, like, for example, the Basketball Diaries, you play that kid with cancer who used to get high, but now you're going to die, and you're in this. It's also like it's very rich ground of actors with fucking what's his face, Leonardo DiCaprio,
one of his early roles,
Mark Wahlberg, and
his early role. I think that might have been his first.
He was good in that one too.
Actor,
he was good in that one.
Yeah, that was a good one. And who was Lorraine Bracco?
And that was that the first time you worked with her?
No, I think Goodfellas was before that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I didn't work with her on Goodfellas, but she's in it.
Would you see her by the table and eating and stuff, or doesn't?
No,
work like
I only worked 2 days in Goodfellas, and it was those specifically only shot those scenes. Those 2 days production was only limited to those scenes.
And Goodfellas was really the first big one, right?
Yeah. Lean on Me was a big movie, but I had one line which got cut, and it was a bad experience. It was my first job. It's John Alvinson who directed Rocky, and it was, it was overwhelming. Production was all these high school kids and all these extras in this high school, and so it was a bad experience. My first time on camera, I was terrified, and the director had no time for me, and the line was, "Hey, I'm going to be a star," and it got cut because I was so stiff and bad. But I'm in the movie; you can see me.
Was that like a lesson?
Yeah, it was a lesson in because I had never been in front of a camera. Although by that point I had been acting for 5 years, mostly in classroom with a lot of good actors in my class. Alec Baldwin was in my class at one point. The actress Sean Young, Lily Taylor at one point. A lot of good people. John Ventimiglia, Sharon Angela. I felt I had chops as an actor, but I'd never been in front of a camera, which was a completely different experience and terrifying, and I didn't really know how to handle it. But the director didn't help me out. And Marty Scorsese, it was the opposite. He made me feel like I belonged there and treated me like an actor.
When you get, I had heard a story about it that you thought you were auditioning for the Tommy character, the Joe Pesci character.
All the guys were reading one of Tommy's scenes, and then the book, which I read the book.
Wise Guy, right?
Wise Guy. A lot of those scenes, Tommy's 22 years old, and I knew Joe Pesci. I didn't, so I thought they were casting someone in their 20s, which I was. So I thought I was auditioning for that part because they didn't tell you what They didn't say you're auditioning for this part. They just gave you this piece of material to prepare.
Do you think Pesci had been cast? Was it a De Niro, Pesci, Rage? You know, it was done.
Oh, yeah.
It was done.
I would imagine.
That's funny. If you could have been Tommy and Tommy could have been Spider. There's no way that
would have been a mess because I didn't have the experience
I know.
to do so. But in your delusional ego of an actor, you think you're ready to be the lead in a Scorsese movie.
Well, why not?
It wasn't.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. I'm glad it wasn't me then. I would have fucked it up.
When you work with somebody like Martin Scorsese, first of all, how do you know to call him Marty? Like, or is that just, you know it? You get there and everyone's like, Marty,
I don't
Marty.
remember. He may have introduced himself that way. It was funny because I heard, you know, I told some people I'm going to audition for, because at first I met the casting director, Ellen Lewis, and I knew Scorsese liked improv. I just knew that from research. So in my audition for the casting person, I did a lot of improvisation. She's like, this is great. I want to bring you back to meet Marty. And I told people, I'm like, I'm going to audition for Scorsese. And they're like, oh, he sits on this really high desk, like a, you know, and I'm imagining like this judge in a courtroom, and he won't shake your hand, and he won't say much, and you got to do your stuff and get out of there, right? So I'm like, oh my God, this sounds. I walk in the office. What does he do? He walks right towards me, sticks out his hand, shakes my hand, says, "How are you?" You know, he couldn't have been friendlier. It was the complete opposite of what everyone was telling me.
Do you think they were just fucking with you?
I don't know. Who knows?
Or do you think that he sensed it in you when because you look the part? The second you open your mouth, you're the fucking part. I mean, you know what I mean? And it's,
well, not really, because when I got to the set, and like I said, he was just very friendly. And I auditioned, I read Tommy's part, so I'm playing it very much like a wise guy, a tough guy. And he said, great, ha, and he laughed, and he made some obscure film reference that I didn't get, but pretended I did. And the next thing they called and said, you got the part, you're playing Spider, which I didn't, and was like, I don't even remember, and like, that's it? It was because in the book, it's really small, little scene in the book. And I'm like, at first I was almost disappointed, then I'm like, just calm down. But when I got to the set and we started rehearsing, there were no lines written, except, why don't you go fuck yourself, Tommy, which is the last line Spider says.
Sure.
Which is the second scene. But for that first scene, which we shot first and rehearsed first, there were no lines written. He just said, just bring Ray a drink. Well, he called
Joe.
him. No, what was Ray's character name? Henry. Bring Henry a drink, because
Henry.
We all referred to each other in character. So I brought and then it would just he would improvise. Where's my drink? And every time it was different. When I first started rehearsing, I played him much more like a wise ass, a little more of an edge and stuff. And he said, Michael, you know, I think this guy's a little slow. So my impulse was to be stuttering and not sure of himself.
Be nervous because these guys are fucking killers.
Yeah, and that made, brought out all that vulnerability, made it even more, that much more
touching,
violent, unnecessary, unfounded, made him more of an innocent, which is why Scorsese is a genius, because he knows that's what he wants to get out of that scene.
I remember I think that movie came out and I was 16 or something.
1990 it came out.
Yeah, I was 15, 16. I saw it on 23rd Street on the east side.
That's where I saw it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And
they had a cast, not the premiere, which I wasn't invited to, but they had a cast and crew screening that we got invited to.
It was a big theater there.
Yeah.
And I left there with a buddy of mine who lived on the Upper West Side, and me and him walked all the way from 23rd and 2nd to 99th and West End, and we couldn't shut up about the movie. And it's like, that's like a special thing.
Yeah, that's like when I saw Raging Bull. I think I was 13 or 14. Me and my buddy went to see it, and we just didn't know what it was we saw. We were just like... It's one of those things that really affect you. That was one of those movies that really made me want to be an actor or be in movies.
Right. I can't even, I didn't have the thought of being an actor, like, really ever until I had crashed and burned so many times in my life. And I came up as like a recovering heroin addict working in a deli, and I was like, maybe I can act, which was just
Which
dumb...
deli?
Katz's.
Oh, you worked in Katz's?
I still work at Katz's. It's just a dumb thought that I had, because, like, whatever. It's like, I'm not an actor. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't born to be an actor. It didn't hit me like that. One thing we do have in common is that I wanted to be a musician, though. And I know that you came up playing music in the first place.
Yeah.
But before we even do that, I heard a backstory about that Goodfellas story like what had happened. Do you know, like with the glasses? Would you be so kind as to share it with the Dopey Nation?
In the second scene, which is when Spider gets killed, I was a young actor and I was very green, and they had a stunt double there, a guy named Norm Douglas, who has doubled me since over the years. He's a good guy, a great stuntman. And I said, I want to do this. I want to do the scene. I want to do the stunt, which I don't do that anymore.
What is the stunt there?
The stunt was he had to get shot and go kind of propelled backwards, slam into the bar, like kind of with your back, and hit the ground, right? So, and I'd never done a stunt, so it's not as easy as you think it is. There's a precision to it, and you don't want to get hurt, so they pad you up. But I was young and very enthusiastic, and so I was like, let me do it. So they padded me up and squibbed me up with blood packs because I get shot 3 or 4 times in the chest. So the first take, I had a glass in my hand that because I get shot as I'm walking to the table with a glass in my hand, but the glass was real. It wasn't a breakaway glass. So it
was supposed to be a breakaway glass.
Well, it should have been, I guess.
In retrospect, yes.
Yeah, because I'm doing a stunt, so anything could happen. So we do the stunt. I go flying back. The gunshots happen. I go flying. The squibs explode, the blood. They make holes in your chest. And I hit the ground, and the glass shatters and slices open to my fingers pretty badly. And they knew right away, and someone was like, don't move. And I knew I hurt but there was a lot of blood everywhere because of the fake blood. But and then I'm laying on the ground and I'm looking up, and there's like Scorsese and De Niro and like looking down at me, really concerned. And like, we got to get first aid or the medic. And next thing I know, I was in a car being driven by one of the PAs to the hospital in Queens. So I walk into the hospital, and the first person who I see there, I say, I cut my hand. They're like, what? Code blue, stat, get him. They, put me on they won't listen to anything I'm saying. They put me on a gurney. The guy's trying to explain. They're not listening because I have 3 bullet holes in my chest.
And it looks so real. They're sure you just got shot.
The last thing they're thinking is movies.
So how did they figure it out?
I'm trying to tell them, and they think I'm delirious. I'm in a movie that Martin Scorsese. Quiet, sir, quiet. And they bring me into some trauma room, start cutting open my shirt, and then they see all the squib, the wires, the blood packs. I say, I cut my hand. I'm trying to explain it to you. And then they like taped it and made me wait in the corner.
They got pissed off because they didn't realize it.
For 4 hours till they could stitch it up, and then I went back and did another couple of takes. But I think that first take is in the movie.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I love that story. I think anybody who's a Goodfellas fanatic would love to hear that.
Well, why it's an important story is because when they initiate you into the mafia, right? The initiation is they cut your finger, and then you bleed the blood on a picture of a saint, and they burn it. So it's cutting the finger. So in some ways, that was my initiation to the world of mafia movies with the capo, the 2 capos, De Niro and Scorsese, and me getting my fingers cut. So
and Marty, the Don.
It was some ways of a metaphor, right?
Did you see it? When did that sort of?
Oh, not till after Sopranos. Not till years later.
That's so far out. When you first came up for Goodfellas, were you thinking, like, did you have any sort of fascination with Wise Guys or that shit? Was that part of you?
Only through the movies, really. Yeah, no, it wasn't. I mean, I was fascinated. I liked The Godfather, of course. I liked Raging Bull. I mean, what were some of the other mob movies from back then? I don't even know. I mean, especially The Godfather.
The Godfather is such a beautiful movie.
Yeah, but I wasn't. I didn't really grow up around that. It wasn't something that fascinated me particularly.
You grew up in Westchester, right? Mount Vernon.
Vernon, yeah.
And there wasn't like a fucking that thing. Mafia.
There was, but it wasn't something that you would necessarily see very in your face,
Well, the funny thing to me is just how you learned every aspect of that life just playing it, right?
Yeah, well, when I got cast, that was the first mob thing, I think it was. I started researching it, and I'd done a bunch of mob stuff over the years. One thing, I got cast in a movie that never happened as Lucky Luciano, so I did a lot of research about the mob then. And for Goodfellas, I did a lot of research into the mob during the 60s and 70s.
When you started coming up, though, as this mob actor, did the real guys start approaching you?
Now and then.
Was it weird? Was it scary? Did you feel like you were one of them for a second, or never?
No.
Not even close?
No. I mean, I've spent most of my time with artists. And
right. Well, that's the funny thing that I want to say to the Dopey Nation. It's like, I've experienced you through the movies. Yeah. I read your book, but I experienced you through the movies and through television. And Michael comes in, he's got his Buddhist necklace, and he's got a Buddhist bracelet, and he's very chill, sort of hippie artist guy.
Yeah, and came exactly. Much more so. And I came much up in experimental theater in East Village and downtown and music scene and stuff like that. I mean, that was my kind of late teens was the beginning of that.
And amongst the
poets and painters and things like that.
Sure. Amongst this crew of mafia actors, of De Niro and Pesci or Marty Scorsese or whatever, were those guys more artist driven? Like, were they?
Well, De Niro's father was a painter.
Right.
I mean, De Niro grew up in Manhattan. I mean, they kind of knew him around Little Italy, but he was much more of an artistic type, I guess.
So when they're breaking away from a beating scene, are they discussing highfalutin artistic things and stuff?
Well, I don't know, because when you're on the set, there wasn't a ton of small talk on the set, and De Niro didn't hang out a lot on the set when he wasn't working, because I think to conserve energy is how it appeared to me. There was more just like joking around.
Sure.
Stuff.
It's just funny. It's just a funny thought to anybody who because you watch it as a witness. You're just a viewer. You know what I mean? And especially as a kid, you're like, these are the toughest guys in the world.
Some of the guys in the movie, especially who have smaller parts, some of them may have had one foot or another, or maybe just grew up around a lot of those guys and maybe didn't have the same kind of artistic education that I did, or that Robert De Niro did as the son of an artist. His father was a part of the abstract expressionist scene in New York. His father's actually mentioned in Jack Kerouac's book Desolation Angels.
Sure.
When he's talking about the Cedar Tavern scene and de Kooning and Pollock, and he mentions Robert De Niro Sr. He doesn't call him Senior because back then there was no Junior.
That's amazing.
But it's in Kerouac's Desolation Angels.
Yeah, I heard you talk a lot about these writers, and I
was a big fan of the Beats in my teens. And
Kerouac was your favorite of them?
As the novelists, I mean, I loved Ginsberg's poetry and Corso's poetry, but Kerouac, I think Kerouac's a very underrated writer because he's so identified with this beat, which became the beatniks and the hippies, which was not him. This persona and this image and stuff, which he had written 1 million words apparently before he even got published. So he went to Columbia. He was a book worm to the nth degree, and he was extremely well written with incredible vocabulary, and his technique as a writer. People think it was just this spontaneous kind of improv thing, but his sentence construction, his imagery. I mean, he was incredible.
Right.
He was very. I think On the Road is not my favorite.
I love On the Road.
I love it. But there's other works by him that I think are far better, like Big Sur. Tristessa, which may be my favorite of his, even Dharma Bums.
I love Dharma Bums.
I think all
too.
those surpass On the Road in a lot of ways.
I like On the Road because it's on the road. It's an adventure.
No,
I like tremendous. That. And I also like linking the characters to his real friends, like who is Burroughs and who is Ginsberg.
Those are in all of them.
Right. But I love that.
And his poetry is incredible. Scripture of the Golden Eternity, which are all poems about Buddhism, really shows he had a very deep understanding of Buddhism.
See, all that shit, when I was a kid, when I was in school, that shit kind of led me to drugs. Like the Beats, Burroughs, Kerouac. There was a famous documentary made at that time called Pull My Daisy. Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah, that was Robert Frank.
And Robert Frank and this guy, and his name is escaping me, but he was a professor where I went to school. I went to school in Purchase.
Who was, Robert Frank?
No, the other guy. Fucking hell, I'm going to kill myself. Hold on, let me look up his name.
It wasn't Jonas Mekas, was it?
No, it was... I can't... This is so annoying.
Robert Frank and...
John Cohen. John Cohen is his name.
I don't know him.
He's a great photographer and filmmaker.
Well, it's not really a documentary. It's an improvisational...
Right, but it's like, it's a documentary of the time. It's a document of that time.
It's not like a traditional documentary where it's kind of like... examining it. It's kind of more recording a subject than like examining something or going into it. But it's a lot of it's improvisational scenes that they're doing too.
You know, Robert Frank just died the other day, too.
I didn't know that.
He just died. And it's like
He was
this era.
amazing.
Oh, yeah. But this guy, John Cohen, was a photography teacher where I went to school at Purchase.
Yeah, two of my kids went there.
To Purchase? Oh, that's funny. It's a great school. I mean,
Really good school.
That's where I did heroin for the first time, but besides that, it's awesome.
You're not alone, probably.
Oh, definitely not. This John Cohen was a banjo player. He played in a band called the New Lost City Ramblers, which is big band. But all that shit really tapped me to want to be a beat. It wanted me to be a writer. It wanted me to be a musician. But I became a drug addict. You didn't go down that path like that.
No.
Did you find yourself here and there experimenting with anything, or
Yes.
Okay.
But I was too cautious and
too smart?
Well, I just wanted to do. I wanted to create. I wanted to do art. I didn't want to. You know. I saw how it just led to the inability to do that when that took over. When that took over everything.
Well, that's a rational kind of opinion.
And it was rational based on seeing it firsthand and seeing it destroy people and just knowing, you know, it's like somehow I had the grace to, you know, avoid destroying myself through that.
Well, it is grace, you know, and I want to jump around a little bit.
It is grace because it's not necessarily just a rational decision.
What do you mean by that?
Because I think a lot of people who get addicted and destroyed by drugs are very smart and are very rational and are just and very beautiful human beings too. And it's just the degree to which that disease manifests, I think.
I didn't see it coming. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think anybody does.
I didn't see it coming, and I didn't know how hard it would be to get out of it. And it's a miracle that I didn't get killed, and it's a miracle that I'm on the other side of it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, if you're, I see everything through the lens of New York. If you were in New York in the 80s and 90s in any kind of artistic circle or downtown circles, you saw tons of it. All of us did. If you were going to clubs or hanging with artists or hanging downtown or working in bars and restaurants like I did, you saw this. It was
everywhere.
Ubiquitous, of course. And among famous, very, I was just studying acting and stuff when, Basquiat died. And then, you saw it in front of you, I was lucky because I fell in with a lot of good peers and a lot of good people who inspired each other and pushed each other to be good at what we were doing and experiment, produce our own. I started producing theater when I was like 21. I didn't even know what I was doing. We were like, let's put this up, and let's find a theater and scrape or borrow money. This guy's mother's got money and just put it up. And I had a lot of people from my acting class who went on to do that, and we inspired each other. Some of whom I still work with today.
I find that
5 years later,
that kind of becomes a drug in a weird way. Like for me, like the process of creating now, it totally supplanted the process of
that's very. It reminds me of The Simpsons did like an episode where it was like the behind the music episode. And And he was like, and it talks about how Homer gets hooked on drugs from doing all these,
the falls. Yeah.
And then he's like, fame was like a drug, but what was really like a drug were the drugs.
Yeah, it's classic. I love that. You were on The Simpsons too, right?
I was. Yeah, I played some. It wasn't one of my favorite episodes.
Well, The Simpsons, I think, my daughter, I pushed The Simpsons on my daughter. I have a 9-year-old and I have a 1.5-year-old, and I won't watch an episode of The Simpsons past season 11. I just won't do it.
Yeah,
I don't want to put myself through it.
Yeah, I mean, no slight to them because making 500 episodes something great is impossible.
Well, but their problem was that it was all the same year. Nobody gets older. Nothing can change. Lisa's always going to be fucking in third grade or second grade.
So eventually, it's the well starts to.
It has to. It has to.
Yeah.
Now, I want to jump around with you because I don't want you to have to go and not talk about this amazing book you just wrote. When did you write the book?
I started writing in 2013.
And now it's 2019. So 6 years ago, you started The Perfume Burned His Eyes.
Yeah, it was released in 2018. I started working with my publisher in 2017. So I guess I finished it around 2016.
Right on. And I loved it. It's a novel. It's your first novel.
Yeah.
And when you started acting, was it acting, or were you thinking I want to write too?
A couple of years after I started writing. You know, the circles I was in, people did a lot of things, but like the punk scene, post-punk scene, no wave scene, New York in the 80s, it was very much cross-pollination in a lot of art forms, you know. So I was playing music. I started writing not long after that. I went till I was 30, and I would move every year, you know, apartments, sometimes twice in a year, and I would move and I would always get these notebooks. By the time I was 30, I had a stack of notebooks with ideas, scripts, half of a script, half of a book, crap, and one day I threw it all away.
Wow.
Because I realized I had nothing to say with all this. And then I started working on a project that became Summer of Sam with a writer named Victor Colicchio, and then realized what could be said through that. And that was the first time something actually got finished. That's
a dark movie. You know, it's a great movie. Great.
Oh, it's a dark movie.
But it's very dark.
Yeah.
And like that dude, it's about this punk rock guy from Bay Ridge from the Bronx, but doesn't live in Brooklyn. I'm remembering.
Yeah,
forgive me.
Club section of the Bronx.
And he fucking, you know, his friends turn on him because he doesn't want to be like his friends anymore.
Well, what happens is, and this is true. Now, it happened in the Bronx, and it happened where I grew up in Mount Vernon, because the murders happened in the Bronx and in Queens, and the cops were going on TV saying, it may be he probably lives among you. He might be the guy who lives down the street in the basement of an apartment in the basement who doesn't talk to people. So people started looking at their neighbors. In some of these neighbors, they started making lists of people who could be the son of Sam. So anything that made you out of the ordinary, you had a bad divorce, you beat your wife, you were a Vietnam vet who was now on drugs, you know, anybody who was the other
is accused. Is suspected.
My cousin got beaten almost to death by guys he grew up with. I don't even know why they thought he was the killer. It wasn't because he was a punk rocker.
Was that the inspiration behind the whole thing? No,
because Victor started writing this story before, on his own. And when I read an early draft of it, I really related because of that reason. And then we started writing together, and then eventually got it to Spike, and it got made. But so some of this really happened. It was a very tense and disturbing period of time in New York.
Well, you seem to be focused on that sort of era, because this book, The Perfume Burned His Eyes, takes place around the same time.
Around the same time, and I was really not. I was 76 when the book starts. I was 10, so I wasn't in the city. I would come in maybe to go see the circus or something, the Empire State Building. I wasn't in Manhattan all that much. I was in the Bronx a lot, in Mount Vernon, which is where my family was. So, but I romance about that period of time.
Sure.
And there's some of the movies that I love that were made, that is something artistically that was happening here that I still have just a nostalgia
It's
for.
Insane if you think about it. I mean, when you walk around Manhattan now and everything is fucking Fresh and Co., just salad, smoothie, fucking shit everywhere. Everything costs $1 million. Everything is the same font. An apartment is like, this apartment is cheap because it's still public housing. But like every apartment is so expensive.
If it wasn't, it would be ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. But the point is, like, in that era, the city was dangerous. Artists could live cheap.
Yeah. I lived on Minetta Street when I was 22 years old and worked in a shitty restaurant. I lived in Greenwich Village. That apartment, I don't know what that apartment would be. My girlfriend and I lived there. She worked in a restaurant. I worked in a restaurant. I was making not that much money, and I lived in the Village.
And not only that, it's New York. You know what I mean? It could be New York as Beirut. It could be New York where you get jumped every once in a while, because I did growing up here. I would get jumped every once in a while.
It happened.
But it creates the possibility for action, be it creative. I mean, so many cool scenes were born here.
It was very fertile ground. And, you know, the unique thing, and pretty much I only was in Manhattan. I never lived in Brooklyn or Queens or anything, and I really didn't spend much time out there. I was here, Manhattan. the neighborhoods in Manhattan, like Chelsea, was very, very, very different than the Village, and was completely different than the Upper East Side, and completely different than the East Village and the Lower East Side. They all had very distinct characters. You didn't have to be wealthy to live there. You had a lot of artists, poets, failed artists, crazy artists, playwrights, and what happened with gentrification is the homogeneity of Manhattan, which in some ways is one of the most disappointing things to me.
The fucked up thing is the only way that it goes the other way is total catastrophe. The only way that like all of these corporations move out of New York is like a flood or some horrible thing. Like 9/11 for a second, you didn't know that the city was going to come back. You know, there was a moment there where things you didn't know.
It's a really great book about, I don't know if you've read it, The Vanishing New York. Did you read that by Jeremiah Moss?
No.
It was started as a blog, and he was just documenting, like, you know, his favorite deli went out of business or his favorite bookstore went out of business.
Is it a photo book, though?
No.
Okay.
The blog had photos and was specifically about places, but the book is a history of gentrification that starts really in early 20th century Manhattan, and it's fascinating to see. The real gentrification on steroids actually is not under Giuliani as much as it was under Bloomberg. Bloomberg really wrote the ticket for
corporations. That was the difference. For
developers to really just have
whatever they want. They can slice up the pie.
But the book, if you're interested in this topic, it's a very, very well researched and fascinating look at this city and what happened over time.
It's crazy because when I was a kid, corporations weren't allowed to plant the flag. There were only mom and pop stores around.
And that's another thing, that in Times Square there were mom and pop stores when I got here in '83.
Yeah. But your book focuses on that kind of era, 1976. 76. It's about a kid who moves from Brooklyn to Manhattan.
Jackson Heights, Queens.
Oh, I'm sorry. I get all these neighborhoods confused.
From a blue-collar, working-class
I've confused 3 boroughs during this interview. Right. It's sad.
So he's brought up in a very blue-collar, working-class environment, and his father and grandfather die within the space of like 6 months, and his mother winds up inheriting a little money that she didn't expect and decides to take him out of his neighborhood school, and just him and her move to the east side of Manhattan, which is only maybe 2-3 miles away from where he grew up, but is completely different planet, basically.
Even in 1976, to move from Queens,
especially in 1976,
right, totally.
Maybe even more then than now in a way.
Because Queens was like just a different sort of planet than 50th Street. It was 52nd Street. Did he move to something like that?
East 51st or first 52nd.
One or the other.
I forget.
But the kicker, and I could eat that kind of shit up because I love reading about old New York too. But the kicker is he moves into fucking the same building that Lou Reed happens to live in.
Right.
Which is just like
Lou during that period did live on the Upper East Side, which I always found. He lived with a transgendered woman. Her name is Rachel, and there's photos of them together. She's on one of the album covers, and so I knew that, and which is not out of the ordinary for if you know Lou's work. But what I did find very strange is that he lived on East 51st and like First in some kind of posh kind of building, because he's always known for living on the Bowery. He lived on Christopher Street. He lived in West 11th Street in the last years of his life, and he was shooting speed. He was a very druggy period of his life, staying up for days, but very
prolific,
fertile, creative period. I always found that fascinating. I started writing the book because my son was 16 and I just wanted to relate to that mind. And Lou wasn't in the book. I was just writing this story about this kid in 1976, and 3 months into the writing, Lou died. And besides being a big fan and him being a big inspiration, I had become friends with him the last in a dozen or so years of his life. So his death hit me on a number of levels, and then all of a sudden I had the idea of like, what if I put the kid and Lou together somehow? And that's how the book was born.
Well, it's a great twist. It's also just like, it's kind of like the idea of fan fiction. Like you know that this guy exists. Like, what if he did this? And I think I didn't know Lou Reed. I always thought sometime in my life I'd get to meet him, but it never happened. But it really felt like him. I was such a fan of his early stuff, of the Velvet Underground and that whole period, and how he sang and how he wrote, and it was so plain but still so nuanced. That's what I love about Lou. And I also love how much he loved early rock and roll, and really just integrated it into the Flash of the 70s. Like he would have the Flash with the primitive, with the poetry. And it was this great weaving.
With the literary.
Yeah.
He was, he really brought, to me what he did that was interesting, he brought a real literary sense to rock and roll. Very different way than Dylan did.
Lou Reed was casual and also satirical. Yeah. Dylan was satirical too. It just was a different approach.
Yeah.
I loved it like in when Lou would talk to himself on the track. Like he would say, like in Temptation Inside of Your Heart, and he would be like, I can talk to myself if I want to. And he'd say one thing and he'd say another thing, and he'd be like, oh, that doesn't sound like Martha and the Vandellas to me. And like, he's like really, he seems like such a lovely dude, but then what you read about him, he was like such a dick to so many people at the same time.
Well, especially when he was doing a lot of drugs.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
In the early part of his life. Take No Prisoners is, that live album was recorded at the Bottom Line, I think in 79. It's my favorite because he talks through half of it and it's hysterical, and he's, I probably still using drugs at that point, but it's just very funny and very revealing in some ways. But the performances of the songs are incredibly passionate and intense, and it's a fascinating document of him.
Well, I think that the listeners of this show would really get a kick out of your book because, like, this guy, the character Matthew.
He's very innocent.
He's innocent, but he gets put through hell in this book.
He does, yeah.
He falls in love with this, I don't want to give anything away, but he falls in love with this woman, this young girl who's like way more mature than her years, and she turns out she's like a sex worker, and she's also like a Wiccan sort of
and
dark,
brilliant and artistic, and everything that he kind of feels he's not, but he inspired by. The premise really is the kid kind of explores all the totems of manhood with this quasi father figure who's almost like a shaman. That's the figure of Lou. He's the artist. So the kid smokes for the first time. He goes to a bar for the first time. He gets drunk for the first time. He has sex for the first time. He does drugs for the first time. Falls in love for the first time, all in this concentrated period when he's under the influence of this great artist,
And when his life falls apart, though, that's like it's very powerful, but it's also something I could really relate to. In the end of the book where he totally hits bottom, but also just all of the little bottoms along the way with the amplifier and the truck and the accident and then having to like
he drives for the first time.
Yeah.
Another totem of manhood,
What was his first drug experience in the book? I don't remember that scene well.
He gets drunk in the bar the first time, but it's when him and Veronica go to this guy's apartment.
Oh yeah, with the coke, right?
They do. I think I'm spacing out. I think they do acid or some kind of laced pot.
Okay. In the end of the book, remind me and forgive me because I was so caught up in so many other aspects of you that I didn't get to the heart of the thing. Is he in recovery at the end? Matthew?
At the very end?
Yeah.
When we go to the 2013?
Yeah, in California.
The whole book takes place from 76 to end of 77, 78. And then the last chapter jumps to 2013, 3 days after Lou died. And now the guy's in his late 50s reflect, and he hears Lou's music being played on the radio because there was a lot of his music on the radio after he died. No, he's not in recovery. What to me what happened is he became an artist in some discipline, and so Lou's was almost initiating him as an artist.
He gives him the bass.
Yeah, that's the other level. And the kid now is a man, and the kid is very, like I said, somehow innocent, very kind of passive in a lot of ways, and just like watching and observing and afraid to really assert his own opinions of things. So the last chapter, I try to have him be kind of very opinionated.
Right.
And very
assured in a way.
Yeah, and very kind of, like he's different than he is as a kid, and there's some evolution. But I wouldn't say he's in recovery, no.
He says something that I always found interesting, because as a fan of Lou Reed's, like I was I was obviously not like taken by the hand and did heroin because Lou Reed did heroin, but it wasn't that far off. You know what I mean? Like he was just one of the people that I admired that was into it. You know, you listen to some of his songs, you listen to Waiting for the Man, you listen to Heroin, you feel that vibe. And I was easily, you know, moved, influenced, exactly. And in the end of the book, you have this passage describing Lou drinking a beer, a Tecate. And Lou is this big recovery guy. You know what I mean? Like that was when I first started coming around recovery. They'd be like, "Oh, maybe you'll see Lou Reed. You know, maybe there's some famous meeting called the Red Door. I heard Lou Reed's always at the Red Door." And I read that, and I was like, "That's interesting." Like, had you read that, or did you just want to throw it in there that he could have a beer?
I was before I knew him. I saw him at a party drinking a beer.
Wow!
But like I say in the book, I had heard on the street, and I say in the book, I heard that he was anonymously.
You want to read that
recovery.
Part? I have.
So because in AA, you're not supposed to say anything who you see there, who you do, but obviously that doesn't apply to famous people.
Well, it does. I mean, I didn't see it.
I had heard he was in AA, so someone from AA must have told somebody that he was there.
Right, but luckily you weren't in it, so you didn't do the wrong thing. I lost the spot.
No, I didn't do the wrong thing.
No, I lost the spot.
So he doesn't, so the kid, after him and Lou kind of part ways in the book, and the kid never really became friends with him again, but he saw him in a...
It's my fault. Hold on, let me...
No, I got it right here.
All right, cool. Here, wait for the siren. Hold for siren. Is that good direction?
That's good direction.
Thank you. There you go. The guys who listen to the show always think the cops are after them when they're listening to the show and they hear a siren.
That's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fucking with people's heads.
Fuck the siren. Just read it. I don't care.
So he says the story told here, closing with me on the edge of manhood, he's talking about the 70s, is as much yours as it is mine. So now the guy's talking to Lou, basically, although Lou's dead. Its end is where we parted, and it would be at least 15 years until I'd see you again. I didn't mention who I was, or that we'd met before, because I didn't expect you to remember or recognize me. You didn't, so I expressed my admiration as a fan. I'm pretty sure it was a post-premiere party for a film, and I'm certain it was at El Teddy's or El Internacional. I don't recall what incarnation the joint was at the time. You were standing at one of the floor-length urinals in the men's room. After following you in... I know.
Yes.
I stood and peed with an empty drain between us to be polite. Looking straight ahead at the white tile wall, I said, I was listening to you this afternoon. Magic and Loss. It's a masterpiece. You glanced over for a little second, and after assessing if I posed any threat, you turned back to the wall and said kindly, that's pretty cool. Then you zipped up and walked away. A little while later, I watched you drinking a can of Tecate at the bar. This surprised me because word on the street was that you were anonymously sober. Standing next to my recovering friend, whose guest I was that evening, I pointed out the beer. He shrugged and said, junkies, man, they have a sobriety all their own. I didn't understand what he meant. By then, you were a long way from junk or speed or whatever it was that possessed you way back when, and to reduce you to junkie, like once a junkie, always a junkie, well, for my friend, I apologize.
Yeah, I love that. And also, from where I'm coming from, I wouldn't judge anybody for doing anything in their life, if
me neither.
Or whatever the case may be.
Only cruelty.
Well, exactly. And that's something that I heard in terms of your Buddhist practice. And I know that I said this is going to be 45 minutes, and we're at 46 minutes. And I didn't do all the stuff.
I'm good till 5.
All right, cool. I liked hearing you talk about Buddhism on that podcast, and I got into Buddhism when I was on drugs, so you can't really get into anything when you're on drugs. And then
except drugs.
Yeah, except drugs and stealing and robbing supermarkets for cookies to eat and stuff. But there was a book that I got one of the first times I got sober, which was a Thich Nhat Hanh book, which was...
I'm reading his new one right now called No Mud, No Lotus.
He's such a beautiful writer.
Beautiful.
And he wrote, I think, The Tao of Sobriety or something like that.
He wrote that, yeah?
I think so.
About sobriety.
And it was just where mindfulness and being sober meet. And when I heard you on this other podcast, you were talking about how, first of all, how the most important reason that you were a Buddhist was because it's to be compassionate and to be kind and to do kind of the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's really all the tenets of 12-step. It's to do the next right thing, to keep your side of the street clean. And I just thought, what a cool intersection that is,
Right. Well, the 12 steps are spiritual principles, really.
Right.
And it's about the 12th step is having had a spiritual awakening. So it's really, I don't think it's any accident that they intersect, right?
And I think that's also probably one of the reasons that you've had a very blessed life, and you've had a life that's like pretty shiny and sweet,
Yeah, for the most, why I would attribute that to, I grew up with very loving parents and grandparents and my brother, and then met really great friends and created my own family, my wife, who's wonderful, and kids and stuff. So I attribute it to that.
How much of Matthew is you?
None of the facts, like none of what happens in the book happened to me. I relate to him emotionally,
seeking and kind of being insecure in a way.
Yeah, like
all teenagers
like
are.
All
though.
teenagers.
Yeah.
Why I wanted to write about teenage years is it's just such a vulnerable time. Where you're so unsure of everything, and you're not a kid, and you're not an adult, and you want to be an adult, but you want to be a kid, and all these things that all of a sudden you want to start to experience. It's just you're going in with you're so unformed in a lot of ways, so. I've had my life hasn't been without, darkness and tragedy like everybody's, but I've been around really great people. I've been fortunate to cultivate really good relationships, I would say, out of anything.
Well, that's beautiful. And they say there's a big writer now who always talks about connection being the opposite of addiction. An addict is without these connections.
Yeah, because with drugs and alcohol and like being possessed by those things, you can't really be mindfulness goes out the window, really.
Yeah, but it's funny because in the beginning you feel like it is a path towards spiritualness. Like you take LSD and you think you're having a spiritual experience, and maybe you are.
But that is not no,
it's the opposite.
Kind of ecstatic, kind of peak experience is not necessarily mindfulness. It's a different thing. Mindfulness in terms of day-to-day life, like being aware of how you want to behave in the world toward others and stuff. Like addiction is the opposite. You're looking in. It's just about what you want, what you're doing.
Well, I think that's what the goal of 12-step living is, to look at what you're doing. Like I heard you on that podcast talking about bearing witness to your thoughts.
Right.
And I had never even heard that phrase before. Yeah, through meditation. So how often do you meditate every day?
Almost. Sometimes not every day. But what I try to do, because you call meditation a practice being practicing at being mindful in life. You know what I mean? It's easy to be enlightened on the cushion. Try doing it on the subway. You know?
Right.
I mean, that's when it's really, life. Try doing it when your kid,
pisses you off.
Yeah, I could. That's what I mean. It's like bringing those things into life, and in Buddhist principles, they believe we're a lot more connected. We are interconnected. Is what we are, not an aspect of what we are. It's really, truly is what we are.
Right. It's a beautiful idea. I feel like now that I'm sober, I could get into Buddhism in a whole other way.
I would heartily endorse.
I'm going to give it a shot. But you have to know that, I probably saw The Sopranos the first time. When did it come out?
It first aired in 1999.
So I think I probably saw it
January 19th.
sometime that year. And the first episode I saw was when Tony was taking Meadow to college.
Yeah, I think that was like the second or third episode.
Yeah. And I was like, what's this kind of thing? And then somehow I got into it. And to tell you that I've probably seen the whole series 10 times is like...
Really?
I think I've seen it 10
extreme.
times. It's fucked up because I would watch it getting high. I would watch it getting sober. It was like played in reruns on Bravo for a couple years. Yeah. And I would sit there and I'd watch the reruns. Wow. Like I'm the
You've seen
kind
it
of...
way more than I have.
I know. So it's kind of embarrassing. But... Oh, fuck. That's the housekeeper. So my dad's housekeeper came, and I sent her away because I'm a dick. And we're talking about The Sopranos now, and the Dopey Nation knows, like, I'm a Sopranos freak. You know, I've seen the whole thing probably 10 times, and I've seen, like I was telling you.
I said was very extreme.
It's sick, in a way. But the fucked up thing is I'm watching it again now. I watch it as a relaxation tool.
No, I understand that. Something that's very familiar sometimes can be very comforting, you know, like you feel safe around those people. I mean, you know what to expect, you know what's going to happen. There's some safety in that. I get that.
I actually did a web series at Katz's years ago, and Joe Ganascoli was my big guest on that.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to wait on the guy that played Hesh at Katz's. He was
Jerry
there
Adler,
there every week. And he was a sweet guy, you know.
He's a sweetheart.
I think he got smart and stopped eating there so he could live. But I just use it as a real relaxation technique. And we had started talking about these other shows that I love the same way, The Wire, Breaking Bad, Mad Men. And Michael, to my dismay, said he had never seen any of them.
I've never seen Breaking Bad, and I never saw The Wire, and I saw the pilot of Mad Men, that was it.
So when you wrote for The Sopranos, you were never thinking, I want to be a TV writer?
Oh, I just wanted to write for The Sopranos. I wasn't thinking in terms of career.
Did you wrote a bunch of classic episodes? Did you like pick, like, for example, in the episode where Christopher gets shot, you wrote that He Has Risen?
I pitched that. So after we shot the first season, I fell in love with the show and all the characters, and I just wanted to write for it. That Summer Sam had just been shot. It hadn't been released. So I wrote a spec script between season 1 and season 2 and gave it to David. And I had Christopher ODing and having this afterlife experience. And David was like, we can... Because I like what you're doing, we can use that afterlife thing after... I'm planning Christopher getting shot in season 2. So that's how I started writing for it.
When they made Christopher a writer, was that because they knew what you were about?
Well, in the pilot, which was written before I was cast, he has a line to Tony, and he says, my cousin Gregory's girlfriend is a development girl in Hollywood, and she said I could sell my story and make money. So he had aspirations towards Hollywood. Whether or not they went down the writer's route because I was writing, I'm not really sure. Maybe he had a little of both there.
And when you have Christopher like struggling trying to write, and you're like Christopher's beating the computer, like is it like channeling your own like passion through this instrument which is not you? Like does it connect back to you when you do that?
I mean, in some ways, because you're always going to bring your own experience into your acting. You know, you try to relate as closely as you can, but there was clear lines between me and Christopher.
Of course.
It was never blurred.
You know what? Let me ask you this, though. When I listened to that podcast, who is Joseph Arthur? Who is this
He's
guy?
A musician.
Do you like him? Is he good?
I do like him. He's really good.
Did he interview without a shirt, or he wore the shirt for the interview?
No, he had a shirt on.
Everything I've seen with him, he's been shirtless.
Really?
Afterwards, I start to check him out.
I'm going to see him. I've never seen him play live, but Jesse Malin. Do you know who Jesse is?
I know the name.
Jesse Malin has a new album out, and he's doing a concert tomorrow night at Webster Hall, and Joseph is going to be playing with him. But Joseph, when he was pretty young, in his early 20s, he caught the attention of Peter Gabriel.
Right.
And Peter Gabriel had a record label at the time, and they signed him when he was really young. So he had, so he kind of came into, and Peter, when Peter was thinking of signing him, he brought Lou Reed to a concert that Joe did at Fez, which is
sure, I know that place,
not there
Cafe
anymore.
Fez, yeah.
He told me this story that he was like, Lou was one of his idols, and like there he is. He might have been 22 at the time doing this concert. There's Lou's in the front with a digital tape recorder,
That's
recording the thing. He was friends with Lou, but he's a great songwriter and singer and musician.
Well, he asked you at the end of the interview, like, have you struggled with addiction ever? And you said yes.
Yeah.
But you don't want to tell me.
I'll say yes again. No, I don't particularly like hearing people's. When celebrities start talking about it's first of all, it's such a hackneyed story, like Rocket Man, that movie. I mean, the rock star who has it all, and then he gets hooked on drugs, and then he hates it.
The thing that really sucks about that movie is why don't they use fucking Elton John's voice? Like, why do you think you want to hear another musician?
But just that story, that rise and fall, and it's like, it's like I'll never read another rock biography. I mean, I don't want to read anybody's rock biography. I mean, Patty's, I think, was an exception because it was much more of a memoir of a time and a friendship than it was like the rise and fall and the drugs and the addiction. I met someone who was starting to tell me about the drug. I'm not really interested. I'm really just not that interested in it. And so I don't. I also don't. There's certain things I want to keep to myself.
That's fair.
I'll be honest.
All right, we're gonna play a little game. We're gonna play. This is when me and Chris started making the show, there was an episode that. There's an episode of The Sopranos where Christopher relapses in the car with the Corky character. Okay. And my dream back then, because I didn't think you would ever come on the show, but I thought I could get the actor that played Corky to come on the show.
Do you know?
No. But I tweeted with him, and he said, I'll come on your show, but I won't reenact the scene. Would you reenact the scene?
No.
You won't reenact the scene?
No, I can't reenact the scene.
No, I have the script. I wrote it down. I'll be you, you be him.
Oh, I'll be him?
Yeah, I'll be you, you be him.
Let me see it.
All right. It's 2 pages.
I mean... you said reenact the scene, and I'm assuming being... Okay, so I'll be Corky.
You're Corky.
All right, I could do that.
All right, cool.
So... It's just these 2 pages?
Yeah. You know what? Just that you did it, put it down. First, we'll do the game. We'll do the game first. I know, I'm all over the place, but forgive me. This is the game called the Stash Word. It's the Dopey game show. You ready? It's just questions you answer. I time a minute. We'll see what we get. Number 1. What is the Sicilian message?
Fish in a newspaper?
Yeah, something like that. Name 3 famous Walt Clyde Fraziarisms.
Walt Clyde Fraziarisms?
Yeah.
I
thought you were a Knicks fan.
Yeah, but I mean...
Posting and toasting, shaking and baking.
I wasn't a fan when I wasn't into basketball when he was on the team.
Oh, this is not going to go well. What was the name of the biker gang Christopher and Tony robbed in season 6?
The Vandals?
No, the Vipers.
The Vipers. I had the V right.
Give me 5 street names for weed.
Dope. Shit.
Okay.
Wilma.
Never heard it, but I'll take it.
Good one, right?
Yeah.
Sense.
Sure.
Ganja.
All right, that works. I was hoping you'd say Buddha, but what are you going to do? What do you yell when you're practicing Taekwondo?
Oh, lots of different things.
Isn't there one thing you're supposed to yell?
Yeah. There's a lot, but that's what they teach you or encourage you when you're starting. But if you get into it, you yell all kinds of things.
Okay. What is the name of the band that Christopher Moltisanti agrees to pay to produce a demo for?
I forgot.
Visiting Day.
Visiting Day.
Yeah,
right?
Man,
that
so
was that
classic.
episode. A hit is a hit. That's a good one.
And he says to the dude's like, I'm out. That's your kind of thing. It was all about music production. And the dude's like, I got nothing. And Christopher tells the guy, spike up, man. He throws meth at him and a fucking needle. And he says, spike up.
Hits him with the guitar.
Hits him with the guitar. It's so good. So good.
I have a really bad long-term. I have a really good short-term memory. Really, thank God, because I can still remember lines. But my long-term memory is horrible.
I have a fucking terrible memory, but I remember everything about The Sopranos because I'm a sick person.
That's cool.
So let's do this scene. It'll be fun.
All right.
It'll be fun for me. I don't know if it'll be fun for you.
Well, let's see.
So it's Christopher and Corky sit parked in Christopher's Maserati. And it was following the hit of Rusty Milio, just to jog your memory.
Who was played by...
What's his face? The singer,
Valli.
Frankie Valli. Okay. And
I came up with that name, by the way.
Corky?
Rusty Milio.
It's a good name. What I wanted to ask you is, why do you suppose Spider was called Spider?
That was based on a real kid, Michael. His name was Michael Gianco, I think, and that was his nickname.
Crazy.
That was horrible, huh? Horrendous.
That really happened, that shooting.
Those guys were fucking...
You know what I also didn't like about... That was the one thing in Goodfellas I didn't like.
Horrible
people, yeah.
For the most part,
yeah.
right?
Did you ever meet any of them? You meet Henry Hill or anything?
No, I wouldn't want to.
Of course. The scene, at the end of that scene when you're shot dead, I mean, you take however many bullets, and then Ray Liotta is above you and he says, he's dead, as though it's a surprise. Like, how could you have been anything but dead in that moment? I didn't like that read. That always annoyed me. All right, here we go. So Christopher and Corky are in the Maserati. There were times when I was a kid, me and my friend Ronnie would play on the floor in my kitchen. Linoleum, Matchbox cars or whatever. He'd go home, his fucking knees would be filthy. His elbows. She never cleaned my mother. Fucking house was a pigsty. Ronnie's mother made him stop coming over. It was so dirty.
That's fucked up.
Embarrassing. My kid, it'll be different. He'll be proud of his house. Wait till you see this place.
So that thing, Rusty Milio, I heard that happened.
Good job. It's a little less cash than we talked about, but there's a bonus in there for you.
It's okay if I fix? Just take me to my car.
Rock out with your cock out. Fireplace, parquet floors, bump a pool table in the basement.
What?
The house I'm getting. You'll come over. Christmas Eve, maybe. We're going to start a tradition. You know, you really got to get yourself some help with this shit.
I will. I'm gonna.
Those fucking works, though. Wets my whistle, that Spike. Why is that?
I don't know. You want some?
Me? No.
Okay, it's just, if you want.
Well, I guess I could toot some. I remember when I did a lot of blow, I used to get diarrhea just from the smell of paper money in the store, any fucking place, on account of all the baby laxative in the Coke when they actually snort it. Hey, I meant what I said, though. You got to get your ass to rehab, fucking Narcotics Anonymous or some shit. How you like this car?
It's nice. The leather.
Yes.
Fucking funny shit, isn't it?
It's fucking so good, but
it's so sad, but so funny, and so... Because he's never going to invite him over for Christmas. I mean, that's such a classic drug. Yeah, you'll come over for Christmas. It's just like, he never wants to see this guy again.
Well, it's that dude who plays Corky is the ultimate junkie. Like, in that scene, you couldn't find a guy that looks more cut out.
That's the only reason why they're friends.
Right, well, of course.
They became friends.
That character, though, was an enigma because he speaks total fluent Italian. Like, remember, he meets up with the hitman and he's giving him the guns and he's...
So was that Eduardo Ballerini?
Yes.
Who played that?
Yes.
Yeah, he's really good.
Really good.
There was another character, I forget who it was, who played some other junkie guy. I forget. But yeah, Ballerini's really good. He's a good actor.
It was an amazing scene, and then the fucked up thing...
His father's a professor of Italian studies at NYU, actually.
That's why he did such a good Italian.
Yeah.
The fucked up thing, though, and I don't know how this affects you or it doesn't, but like, as an idiot junkie, I would sit there and I would get high to the scene.
Wow.
Literally... because I'm a fucking idiot junkie.
Play along at home, kids.
Basically.
Horrible.
And then afterwards, they play this song. They play this Richie Havens song, Dolphins. The Fred Neil version.
Fred Neil. Oh, so Richie Havens wrote that?
Yeah.
But Fred Neil sang
Yeah,
it?
the Richie Havens
That's
version.
The Ride. That's the episode, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good
Well, that's the episode where Adriana dies. Or
no, that was long-term parking.
Right. But it's around there.
The Ride was, and that was when he was at the feast, the festival. He's spacing out. It's after
with the dog.
Scene.
It's right after that. And he's feeding the dog.
Great
and
episode.
you're lying on your back. Or
who wrote that one? That was a good one.
Terrence Winter.
Yeah, Terry's great.
He's good.
Yeah.
But you were so good in it, and like, Oh my God. I personally hated.
One of my favorite episodes.
Me too.
Yeah.
But it really struck a nerve with me because it was so real.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah.
It is. But it's like, it's really real. And when they play that I mean, the reason that show was so good was because the performances were great, the writing was great, and then the music is great. Oh. You know, the things you see when they play that version of Dolphins,
I know.
It really feels like that. It feels like Dope. You know, and I listen to Dolphins now. I always was like kind of enamored with the song from the scene.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, this guy Fred Neil, who I don't even know who that is.
Didn't he write Everybody's Talking? Is that Fred Neil?
I thought Harry Nielsen wrote it.
Harry Nielsen sang it, but he didn't write it.
Maybe it seems like the same kind of thing.
I think Fred Neil wrote it.
And then Tim Buckley does a version of Dolphins also.
Oh, really?
But the Richie Havens one is the one that I love. But Fred Neil takes me to the scene, and the scene is very meaningful to me.
Yeah, because it resonates.
And also it becomes like a personal thing, like, and it's fucking bizarre and weird that somebody like me could experience this character and get high with them. You know what I mean?
Relate it to a time in your life, right? And when you see that episode or hear that song, I bet it probably takes you to a specific.
It does, but then the really interesting thing to me is that when Chris and I, and obviously you keep getting confused when I say Chris as though I'm talking about Moltisanti, but I'm talking about my friend Chris, who I started the show with. And when we started the show, I was 4 months clean.
He doesn't do the show anymore?
He's dead.
Oh, he's dead. He relapsed and died.
He relapsed and died last summer.
Oh, that's who you started the show with?
Yes.
I thought he was just a friend. That
no.
I didn't realize that you were both.
Him and I started the show together.
He died last year?
He died last summer.
Heroin?
Fentanyl.
Yeah.
And I remember, though, we would talk about, because I was like a junkie that would watch a lot of TV. Like, I would always call myself this bourgeois junkie that I probably wouldn't have a heroin problem if I didn't have cable. I'd probably clean up because I wouldn't want to live in the street or something. Because, like, I enjoyed that aspect, like getting high and not existing. And we would talk about this scene, and I would reenact it with him, the Wet's My Whistle scene, that Spike. And, like, he refused to do the lines. And, like, just the fact that you're here doing it, it has this incredible meaning to me because I know that Chris would have lost his fucking mind, you know, and it's just very cool. Like, I know, like, where are you? You're on the 21st floor in Jewish public housing, sitting at the table talking to this drug addict, but you did something here, and I really appreciate it. Are you open about your years in sobriety? Of course.
How long are you sober?
4 years sober, 4 years and a month sober today.
And when did you start the podcast?
3.5 years ago.
How many have you done?
This is going to be the 205th episode.
Wow.
And it's 205 episodes in a row, 205 weeks in a row, never missing a week, even when he died.
And it's not all artistic. It sometimes deals with...
It's usually just drug addicts. They're going to be like,
active
what?
and
usually recovered. Usually in recovery.
Right.
You know, my friend Chris would always call himself recovered, and I told him he was really arrogant for saying that. And then he wound up dying. You know, it's just fucking crazy.
Because it'll kill you.
It will, especially now. Well, last summer I had this friend who I met in college, one of my best friends, who also watched a ton of The Sopranos with me. He died, and 6 weeks later, Chris died. And it's just like, it will kill you. Yeah, from fentanyl. Yeah. The same exact story. It will kill anybody. And the show is mostly drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. Just stupid fucking stories around addiction. Yeah. You know, and then also like kind of how we get sober and how it's so funny to be this lying, thieving addict and then become somebody who does the next right thing and helps the next person and carries the message. And the duality of the two is what I was so interested in. And also, as a fan of the Howard Stern show, like, you listened to the Howard Stern show and you felt like you were one of his friends. You listened to the Howard Stern show and you felt like you were getting joy from hearing his life. Like, that was the nuance of the Stern show. And there was a guy on the Stern show called Artie Lang, and Artie Lang was this terrible drug addict, and he wound up like relapsing on the Stern show.
He did that movie Beer League.
Yeah,
a lot of my friends were in.
Right, and he wound up trying to kill himself.
Which is actually a very it's a movie that's actually is a very sweet movie.
It's one of those
seen
kind. I never saw it, and it's embarrassing.
It's it's a movie you wouldn't think would be good. I don't mean that, and it's just like it's an indie, and it's just guys playing softball, beer league. It actually has a lot of heart. That movie.
Well, they need more movies like that. I think movies that have heart. I think we don't get characters like the characters that you used to play anymore. What did you get? What is this show you're working on now?
I'm doing a series called Lincoln. That's based on the Lincoln Rhymes series of novels by Jeffrey Deaver. It was a movie, Bone Collector.
Sure,
it's based on that. But I have a movie coming out. It's going to premiere at the Metrograph here in New York in February or March, called Cabaret Maxime. That a lot of some soprano, John Ventimiglia's in it, Sharon Angela's in it.
I met that
David
guy
Proval's
at
in
Katz's
it.
Too, yeah.
Arthur Noscarella's in it. It's kind of an homage to Cassavetes' Killing of a Chinese Bookie. I play this burlesque club owner whose life and livelihood is threatened by gentrification kind of forces. We shot in Lisbon. It's a Portuguese filmmaker who lived here for a while. It's the third movie we've done with him. But it's something that's... like when I said when I started out, I'm still working with the same people. It's something that I produced as well, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of, and that's coming out in February. I think we're about to set the date. Metrograph just took it, and it's going to be released digitally right after that.
Awesome.
I'm really happy about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm doing the book. I've been doing a lot of live readings of the book.
You read so great.
And I started doing it with a couple other actors and with some musicians, and we're going to do it at Joe's Pub. Kind of a longer 90-minute version, as much of the story as we can get in, with a bunch of actors and some musicians.
Did you ever think that you're going to do it as a play kind of thing?
It's kind of like a radio play, because we're doing it as a reading, but there's a certain twist that I'm doing with, and I've been doing it. I've been doing a lot of those in L.A. I've been doing it with Lydia Lunch, not reading with her. She does her stuff, and I do my read. But now I'm incorporating actors and musicians in it, because it should be with musicians.
I bet the whole thing could be a play. And I think it would be a totally different thing. You know what I mean? Nobody's ever made a play like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's the first. I'm making steps in that direction, kind of bringing this to life in different forms. That's been really fun.
It's amazing.
Really exciting.
It's so cool. And I just want to ask you this: when you play such a crazy knockdown junkie character, where are you getting it from? Where are you getting the nuances?
I've seen it.
You've seen it personally.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I've researched it a lot, and I've seen it, a lot of it.
Well, I cannot tell you what it means to me to have you over here and to take the time.
Thanks.
I know that my dad's housekeeper is going to show up, so I'd much rather we end it before she comes back.
And what time does the butler get here?
The butler comes after that.
After that.
And then the tennis instructor.
And the valet?
We play upstairs, on the roof.
It's high living in this joint.
All right. People fucking constantly say that we are bragging that he lives in Manhattan on the 21st floor, and now that the housekeeper is coming, and now you're really giving it credence here. Could you tell him what kind of middle class schmaltz place this is?
This is like the Garment Workers Union, right?
Yeah, International Ladies Garment Workers Union building.
It was built by those guys.
My grandparents moved in.
A lot of red diaper babies grew up here.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
My grandfather was a communist dentist.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of artists came out of here. Yeah.
Do you feel like I wasted your time by having you here, or did you get?
Oh God, no! I enjoyed it a lot. Man.
Oh, good.
It was fun.
It was
really, I love having conversations like this, especially about talking about artists and the formative years and all those things. It's always really fun to talk about. No,
well, it blows me away.
Good job.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It's beautiful to have you.
Same.
So that was Michael Imperioli. Fucking beautiful to have him. He was a little reluctant to bring the Dopey. However, he did do the fucking scene.
He did do the scene. Very impressed.
The scene I was practicing. When Bill came over, I showed him. I didn't make this clear when Michael was on the show, but Bill was like, well, how did you get the scene? And I was like, I fucking just watched the scene over and over again and typed it out.
Typed it out slowly.
And I have the script sitting in front of Bill. He was very impressed or he's also kind of like unimpressed that I didn't just Google a free Sopranos script.
You want to do this with me? We could do this.
Do you want to? They just heard it.
We don't have the time.
Here, do you want to play Christopher and I'll play Corky?
I'm definitely not an actor.
All right, we're not doing it. We can't do it. Listen, man. This show's not supposed to be long. It's not supposed to be longer than a 2-hour show. I'm going to have Sam down my throat about this.
I feel guilty.
You did great. You brought too much Dopey not to be contained. And Michael Imperioli, it's like, listen, I know people in the Dopey Nation are going to be like, I don't care about this. He's not a drug addict. Listen, guys, this is something I've always wanted to do, and I can check the dream off in my box of dreams to check off.
I mean, I don't even feel like we've talked about Dopey Con and Mountainside and the event that you're going to do. I was hoping we would get
Anna's going to get mad at you.
Well, not only is Anna going to get upset, but I wanted to make you shine. I mean, like, it's a big deal.
All right.
We're kicking off, like, we have this brand new recovery resource center. Which
you're going too fast here. Dopey Nation, October 12th, a lot of you know, is Dopey Con. The great part live Dopey.
So exciting.
Part Dopey convention, part storytelling jamboree. That's how I'm billing it, by the way.
I love it. Part
live Dopey, part Dopey convention, part storytelling jamboree. It is happening at Mountainside's new wellness center. Now, Bill, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm so excited, and I'm really excited you're going to be the very first big event that we do there.
It's also the first event I've ever done.
Right.
Actually, it'll be the second because
that's right.
Because the Appalachian Healing Festival is my warm up for Dopey Con.
Right. I mean, we have this brand new recovery resource center. It's a hub of recovery right on 18th Street in the heart of Chelsea, between 7th and 8th Avenues.
Look at you.
And it opens. The grand opening is Saturday, September 28th. We have an event that's open to anybody in New York City. And you can just go to our Facebook page and register. It's called Recovery to Discovery. And your event, though, is really the big thing that's happening in October.
Well, it's funny. There's this lady, this woman, this wonderful woman named Anna, who is in charge of something at Mountainside. And she's
Vice President of Marketing.
She's the Vice President of Marketing at Mountainside. And she's become the Dopey champion. And she's putting on Dopey Con. And Anna is a tenacious woman. And she's like, they're doing an arcade, a game room downstairs. And she's very funny. She's like, David, have you ever heard of Barcade? Well, we're going to have that downstairs, but without the bar. I was like, oh, so it's going to be an arcade? She's like, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, they delivered the pool table last week, ping pong tables, like old fashioned Ms. Pac-Man arcade machines, Mortal Kombat machines. And there's actually going to be a ping pong tournament the opening weekend. I think it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Pizza party, and it's open. What we've done is we've invited a lot of the sober livings in New York City.
It'll be a real high-level ping pong tournament then.
Yeah.
I go places and I play ping pong. I'm like, just so you know, I've spent a lot of time in detox. Let's go.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because if you've spent any considerable time in any sort of recovery situation, you better be decent at ping pong.
I hope some of your listeners from the Dopey Nation like ping pong because on the 12th, right, October 12th, I'm pretty sure it'll be open to the public.
There was a dude. When I was at Mountainside, he was like a minor league pitcher. He was this amazing athlete. We called him Johnny No-Nos, okay? And he was a very handsome guy. He always wore like a tracksuit and, but he was this insanely good ping pong player. He was unbelievable, except he went up against this hippie named Pat. And Pat the hippie slept through every group, but he came alive in this ping pong tournament and he destroyed Johnny No-Nos. But it was this is what I hope your ping pong tournament is like.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. You know how competitive these guys and girls in sober living can get.
I love it. So yeah, Anna wanted to open up the downstairs of fucking Dopey Con up to the Dopey Nation to play video games. I'm like, no. They're going upstairs. We've got Dopey business to do. Right. But of course, there might be some video games if you guys want to play. But I don't really want you guys playing video games at Dopey Con.
Okay, I don't either. I want them upstairs with you. Are you going to be selling merch?
That's the idea. But
Okay.
we'll see. There will be, I have like 10 Oy Vey hooded sweatshirts that I'm going to sell. I am making exclusive, super thick, dopey hoodies that are not available on the website that will only be available at Dopey Con.
Awesome.
There might or might not be Dopey Con t-shirts, probably not, but there might be Dopey Con t-shirts, and I have 120 new, well, they're the same old Dopey design, but newly made Dopey hats will be available.
Excellent.
So everybody there can get one if they want, and if not, I'll have a fuckload of Dopey hats at home.
You know,
for
we
guys to
started
wear.
this, like, you know, Madonna's tour opens tonight, right, in Brooklyn, and I am hitting the merch table, like, as soon as I walk in the door. Merch is big.
Me and Linda, my lovely partner, went to see The Who on Sunday night. And it was, Pete Townsend is like somebody that, like, maybe he's one of my Madonnas for you. I love Pete Townsend. And it was a thrill to see Pete Townsend play. And The Who was pretty good. They had some sound problems, but it's a thrill for me to be in the same room as Pete Townsend, to be honest with you. Anyway, they had insanely nice looking merch, but it was very expensive.
Yeah, very.
It was so expensive, I refused to buy it. The t-shirts were $55. $55?
Yeah, I think Madonna's t-shirts are probably $65, $70.
It's obnoxious. It's fucking obnoxious. You fucking sell a ticket that's 5 floors up for $100, and then you get smacked with a 50. DopeyCon t-shirts, the most they'll be is $25.
I mean, that's where they make their money these days.
But it's too much. It's too much. The fucking hats, $25, maybe 20, maybe 25, something like that.
Yeah, don't commit to anything. Right
Yeah,
now.
maybe there'll be $55 t-shirts. But the Who's merchandise, it looked really good, I have to say. Anyway, DopeyCon is coming fucking October 12th. It is mostly sold out. But if you want a ticket, go onto the thing.
There's a wait list. There's a real wait list. So if you...
Is that what it is?
Yeah, if you go onto our Facebook page and register for DopeyCon, it'll bring you to the event page and you can put your name on a wait list. And you know how these things go. People will be dropping off for one reason or another. So definitely, just because it is primarily sold out right now, if you want to go to our Facebook page, Mountainside Treatment Center, and sign up for the wait list.
All right, there you go. Sign up for the wait list. Don't hit me up for tickets. Sign up for the wait list. All right. I got this email today, and it really, really meant something to me. It actually meant so much to me that I posted it on our Instagram and our Facebook. And you can read it, Bill. It's the bottom. It's here.
Maybe the bottom? From right here?
Yeah.
Just got to 8...
No. From here. Hey, Dave.
Oh, hey, Dave.
You got to say, hey, Dave.
Hey, Dave. Just got to 8 days sober, and I can honestly say I owe it all to you and Chris.
All of it.
Still not sleeping and restless from not using Oxy after 2 years. I took the cold turkey route with no methadone or Suboxone.
Which is crazy.
I know this feeling lasts a long time, but I'm slowly getting naps in here and there, while listening to Dopey, of course. Keep up the good work, and I fucking hope I can get another 8 days. I'll send a Dopey story in the future, but right, I can't even think about drugs without wanting them. Ha. Toodles for Chris.
I love that. That's James. He's in Canada. I heard from him later today, and he's doing well. He's in high spirits, considering. I know that, like, I kicked dope an infinite number of times, and I kicked dope many, many times. It was never totally cold turkey unless I think it was never totally cold turkey. I always made sure I had weed and pills and anything I could to not do dope. Maybe I don't think I ever kicked totally cold turkey. I think I always had weed, and when I was lucky, I had pills. But what I told this guy was the shower is your friend, the television is your friend, fucking anything that you can do to give you pleasure is your friend. What would you say to somebody who is in that situation?
I tell them to get in their pajamas. Crawl on the couch, lay on your side. I always found that, like, laying on the couch and being in your pajamas and throwing a blanket over you was a lot more conducive to feeling better than trying to, like, lay in your bed and fall asleep. I always just try to focus on rest, like, just, close my eyes and rest.
Right.
I felt like I can't tell you, countless nights falling asleep on the couch with the TV on. That's the way I was able to fall asleep. Never in bed. I went over a year without sleeping in my bed. I lived on my couch.
Well, that's actually very meaningful because the bed can be like torture to be in a bed without being able to sleep can be torture. For me, like, I would feel so hot and cold. Like, the hot and cold was always like crazy, because when you kick opiates, I would just always be freezing until I put a blanket on me, and then I would be mixed between freezing and boiling, and my stomach would be turning. And I really I remember every time I urinated, it was like the only time I would pray is when I urinated, and I would say, "Thank God for letting me drain." I would say that every time, because it was such a simple thing that took like the pressure off my bladder. And I also remember just watching a ton of Lost, watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, watching any hour that I could get where I was thinking of something besides copping and besides misery was like a great win, for me. That's how I look at kicking. And my thoughts and my prayers are with James. And Bill, it was a fucking joy to have you. I wanted to do way more at the end, but I don't like episodes that are too much longer than 2 hours.
Yeah, no one's listening to us right now.
You'd be surprised. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course, absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
And we will have you back. I know that the Dopey Nation will love you, right, about how much you loved Bill's crazy water tower adventure. There was this place years ago. They set it up as a secret restaurant inside a water tower. Have you heard about that?
No, in New York?
Yeah. They decorated the inside so it was like this super bougie, secret, clandestine water tower fucking restaurant. And there's also many books about how beautiful the water towers of New York are.
They are beautiful.
And I know from where we live, or where my dad lives now, where I grew up, you look out and you see so many. And where I grew up, on the cityscape, there were these old sort of murals that were ads that were painted on the side of the brick building between, 33rd and 20th Street. These big old kind of textile ads and stuff, and you can still see them, and they're very faded and beautiful. And one thing I do like, I never talk about what I like about the episode, but one thing I like about this episode is that you talked about spirituality and mysticism, and Michael Imperioli did.
Yeah,
we talked about gentrification and the beauty of New York, and so did Michael. So there was a real kind of not planned through line.
See, can I say one thing?
Say 10 things. Say whatever you want.
So this water tower is right off of Columbus Circle, right next to Time Warner, and I walk by it a lot because I'm a big performing arts fan, a big opera fan. So I'm always going to the Metropolitan Opera. So I get off at Time Warner Center and I walk, towards Lincoln Center. So there's the water tower, and I look up at that water tower every single time I pass, and I can't believe that I was at the top of that thing.
Right.
If you could see how high this thing was.
Dangerous.
And I just sort of can't even relate to who that guy used to be, but I don't get chills, but I feel it in my chest.
I know what you mean. The most amazing thing is how you could have been this fucked up, crazy person, right? And the city is the same as it was then, and you're different. I mean, the city's changed all over the place, too, but you're different, and this tower is still there, the same exact thing as it was.
I want to get a really good photograph. I've always wanted to get a really good photograph of this tower.
Right.
And then frame it, beautifully frame it and hang it up in my apartment so that, it's a great story, right? But it's also a real reminder, and no one else needs to know what that water tower represents.
You'll tell everybody the story. You will. Of course you will.
I don't know.
They'll be like, oh, that's a really handsome picture of a water tower.
But it's a landmark of my addiction and, where my addiction took me.
It totally is. It's
a real New York landmark.
I love that. And Bill, thank you again. And I can't wait to have you on again. And you guys follow us on Reddit, the Reddit Dopey Nation war. We have a war between the Reddit group and the Dopey Nation group. I think it's dying down. But the thing about the Reddit people is they're unpredictable and you never know when they're going to strike. So I think the Dopey Nation people need to be cautious. But follow us on Reddit, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I don't know. I think that's it.
Yeah, that's great. I can't wait to be back, Dave. Thank you.
Stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris.
I want to take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. but I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had, and I wanna take a ride up in the sky. Watch this aeroplane just pass me by, and I wanna see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had, and my shadow's getting smaller and smaller, and it's time to where I stand. Shadow's getting smaller and smaller, and it's time to where I stand. And I wonder would they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard to find. And I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. Damn it, all these suckers make me mad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And these suckers make me mad, and I wanna call my dad, and it's all I ever had, and it's all I ever had, and it's all I ever had.